Hi, I'm Kirstie Allison-Ampey, Vice Chairman of the School Committee. This is the Arlington School Committee meeting of Thursday, December 14th, 2017. You'll notice I'm not Jeff Thielman. Mr. Thielman is unavoidably detained and should join us by 7 p.m. So he's asked me to chair the meeting until then. So we've already talked about this week's art, which is cool. You should look at it if you haven't already been here. It's from the Audison. And moving on, we have public participation. And I begin with Ramona Granucci. I forgot to say, so public participation is limited to 3 minutes, and we listen, but we don't respond in this time, but we may choose to take things up either later in the meeting or at another meeting in the future. So okay. Thank you. All right.
So, hi everyone. My name is Ramona Granucci. I live on 16 North Street, and I have a daughter in first grade at Pierce. I'm here to represent a group of concerned parents as well as the after-school providers at Pierce School who all feel strongly about the kindergarten playground. And it's kind of strange coming from a first grade mom, but my daughter still use it in the after-school. The playground is in desperate need of repair. It's significantly inadequate due to the increased enrollment and the number of children. There's an additional kindergarten class. There's over 70 children that are in this small playground space. It's also inadequate for the developmental needs of the 5 to 7-year-old children who use it. It's clear that it was designed for kids from 2 to 5 in the preschool setting. I happen to have a very tall daughter that I'm sure my colleagues could attest to. She could actually reach up and touch the handlebars on flat foot. The playground is really built for much smaller children. The Pierce playground was installed in 2003 when the kindergarten population at Pierce was approximately 39 students. This is a 72% increase since the playground was built. The playground borders Newland Road on Blossom Street along the side of the school, and it's considered school property. And it consists of this one small play structure on one half of the playground and one swing set with two swings, which occupies the other half of the playground. There's also a sloped area against the fence that's partially held up by a low concrete retaining wall. For both parents and children, the kindergarten playground offers a safe refuge for children entering Pierce Elementary. The separation from the larger structure helps them have a dedicated and safe place to run, eat, and play. Unfortunately, the play space is not designed to optimally take advantage of these benefits. The Playground Committee was approached by Jane Torregrossa, the owner of Mrs. T's Play Care, as well as several of the other after-school providers. They bring about 37 first-grade students to the kindergarten playground every day after school for approximately 1 hour, and my daughter is one of those children. The providers noted the children have tripped over the large exposed tree roots, causing many skinned knees, hands, and faces. There have even been head injuries resulted from falling from the eroded area where the low cement retaining wall is. Children have fallen off the rocks and hurt themselves because the rocks are not stable or secured in the ground, and because the ground has settled in the last 15 years, the soft blacktop is separated from the cement sidewalk by 2 inches, and children routinely get their feet caught in and fall. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on, Mira Whiting.
Hi, my name is Mira Whiting. I live on Lowell Street Place, and I have a son in first grade at Pierce and 2 younger sons who I hope will be at Pierce in the next few years. I'm also here to provide support for the Pierce Playground Project. Through observations of our own children playing on the playground, as well as through conversations with the kindergarten teachers, one of our main concerns is safety. The small retaining wall is not tall enough to hold in the sloped area above it, causing it to erode. All of the kindergarten teachers, as well as the after-school teachers, have expressed concerns about this area and have seen many falls and injuries, including head injuries, as a result of the slippery conditions and exposed roots. We know that there are many other larger projects happening in the Arlington schools at the moment, but as the smallest school in town, we are asking not to be overlooked. Our population is starting to see the explosion that other schools in town have experienced, and we feel that the kindergarten playground at Pierce was already vastly inadequate for the children it was meant to serve. We hope you will consider our request to be included in the upcoming facilities subcommittee and that funds could be allocated to redesign and improve the playground for the youngest children at the Pierce School. Thanks.
Thank you. Next, Doug Young.
Hi, my name's Doug Young. I live at 202 Lowell Street in Arlington. I have daughters in kindergarten and second grade at Pierce, and I have a 2-year-old who will hopefully be at Pierce in a couple years. I am here to speak on behalf of my wife, Katie, who has organized the Pierce Kindergarten Playground Committee. Katie has appreciated the contact she has made with Jeff, Cindy, and Jennifer from the school committee and looks forward to working with you to find a solution together. It is our hope that we can work with the school committee to explore funding with the CPA, other grants, fundraising, and perhaps money from the capital budget to rebuild our playground. Outdoor play is very well documented as being necessary and crucial for child brain development. Studies of how young people learn have proven that children acquire a vast amount of basic knowledge through outdoor play and exploration. So what do they need? Children display the highest levels of physical activity on a combination of manufactured playground equipment and natural elements. They also benefit from using manipulative objects and loose parts in their play area, as well as multi-purpose open space, allowing for running and creative play. Children in elementary schools in the U.S. have lost so much important time outside with only 15 to 20 minutes of recess to accommodate curriculum changes inside the classroom. Our kindergarten teachers are insightful and creative and want to set their students up for success. They would love to use the kindergarten playground as an outdoor classroom to teach math concepts using sidewalk paint or have a large chalkboard, possibly a stage, or other engaging items to increase the amount of time the children spend outdoors. Studies have shown that this will lead to increased focus, attention, and academic performance in the classroom. The Pierce Kindergarten Playground serves the Pierce community for before-school play, during school recess, and after-school play. Not only does the Pierce community use this space, but many neighbors do as well. The current play space is inefficient, inadequate, and does not take into account the number of ways that children need to play. They need to climb, calculate risks, negotiate, run in order to thrive. Let's help them grow to their full potential. Our plea is to invest in the Pierce children and the children in our community by investing in our kindergarten playground. Speaking on behalf of my wife, Katie, the Pierce PTO, and Principal Hartley, we are lucky to have so many caring and dedicated parents here tonight advocating for this important issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Next, Krasi Petkoff, I'm not sure.
Hi, good evening. My name is Krasi Petkov. I'm here with both my children, my daughter Emma, and I'm here on behalf of the Pierce Committee for the renovation of the kindergarten playground. My daughter is currently a kindergartner. My son will be in kindergarten next year. And the funny thing is I'm all new to the community. We just moved at 652 Summer Street in Arlington. And when we were visiting the playground, I said, oh, wow, this playground looks like for preschool children rather than kindergartners. The kids love being outside, but it's so sad to see them being completely losing any patience when they need to take turns on the 2 swings that are available for them. And as many of the parents here, and I will state, you know that we have an increase of enrollment. Currently, 67 children are using the playground, 38 children in the after school. And as far as I know, there are some local daycare providers that are also using the playground. The kids are not challenged by the facility that they have in use. They completely are outgrowing it. And needless to say that as any asset, especially one that is accommodating the play of children, being built in 2003, It's already 15 years, and that asset has to be reassessed in order to understand whether it's hazardous and usable. Needless to say that it doesn't accommodate the developmental needs of the children. I have been working together with Katie and reviewing a lot of paperwork. Initiative was taken by the Pierce parents community back in 2014. A lot has been done. We met with Jeff and Cindy at a school committee meeting at Cafe Nero, and we introduced the problem. And we're raising awareness around the community. We are trying to get people on board, not only parents, but other neighborhood families who are using the playground to get on board with us in terms of helping us make this project successful. There is a limited funds that are available right now, but we would like the school committee support and the town support in order to move forward with designers and possible construction. So I think that the project itself qualifies for the CPA funding that is available through the town of Arlington. Other towns like Belmont and Cambridge have done successful projects using CPA funds, and I think that that's possible with the school, with the Pierce School. And I mean, it doesn't really need to be said, but the reason why I'm in Arlington is because education is very important for me and for my children, and it's a wonderful place to raise children. But I think that in order to keep making other families come the same way I did, I think that we need to upkeep all those facilities and assets that we have available for the well-being of the children and their education. Ma'am? So I really appreciate your time today and looking into that.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Jason Martin.
Hi, my name is Jason Martin. I live at 70 Alpine Street. I am also a member of the Pierce community. I have 2 children at Pierce, a 4th grader and a 2nd grader, and one more who will be joining that as well. I think I'm the last member of the group of parents talking here today. And just echoing, you know, I think what's been brought up by a number of different members of the community. I think what we're really looking for is help from the committee and the school department to kind of help move this forward. My wife was the chair of the PTO a couple of years ago when the parents had tried to invigorate some process into evaluating the playground and seeing what we could do. There was a GoFundMe campaign. There was some funds that were secured and conversations that were initiated with some of the architecture firms. We also worked with one of the kindergarten teachers, Colleen Lloyd. She applied for an AEF grant, which was granted to secure some funds to bring some additional things to the playground. The kindergarten teacher concerns was really just about capacity in particular, as well as some of the safety concerns, that they were literally just kids were running out of things to do, and there wasn't enough to keep all the different children occupied. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to, work through the logistics to actually spend those funds and figure out how to get them installed. And, I think just part of the bureaucracy and understanding part of the process, really that's where we need your help in order to kind of move something forward. I think as a parent group, we sort of reached the limits of what we knew how to do and kind of how to navigate the system, and, really just ask that this be considered as a part of the normal process. And similar to, the really great playgrounds that we've seen in some of the other elementary schools around town, the kids take notice when they're at soccer games, and they have a great time at the playgrounds at Dahlin and at Brackett and at Hardy, and a number of the other schools. And, I think as some of the other parents said, we just want to be sure that Pierce is included in that, and we feel it's sort of time for us to be looked at within that schedule, and appreciate that consideration. So, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that's the end of public participation. At this point, we move on to discuss the AEF fund, what you see on the screen. Mm-hmm. So with Amy Spear, Sarah Bird, and I'm not sure who else comes up for this. In the meantime, I forgot to welcome and introduce Mr. Jason Levy, who's the president of the AEA, and also our student representative, Hikara Koga? Hikara, okay, please, thank you.
Sorry.
Okay.
Thank you for having us here this evening. We're here to speak a little bit to share some awareness about some really fantastic news. I'm done already?
Nice having you here, you know.
It's really great to share the wonderful news from AEF, and some of these slides may look familiar, but that's because it's embedded within the context of what I came here to speak about back in October with the Safe and Supportive Schools work. So I'll go through some of them, and you can let us know too. So starting off with a huge hearty thank you. As many of you already know, in the first year of this multi-year plan, AEF has already committed to over $100,000 of funding for the Arlington Public Schools to support the social and emotional building towards safe and supportive schools and furthering the work that they've spent a number of years already bolstering. So we wanted to say a huge, large, and continuous thank you, as it will come through the many different steps we take in this plan. But it's not just going to end with 1 year. We're going to be looking at future years where we can expand the work that we start this year, and eventually it will add up to, I believe, about $200,000 over the course of 3 years or so. So that's a huge thank you, knowing that we've got that commitment not just for 1 year, but to move forward as well.
So for those of you, you all pretty much know AEF, but for those of you not familiar, the thank you actually goes to the Arlington community. We are 100% funded by charitable donations, whether that's residents or local businesses, and we award about $100,000 a year on average to the schools. This is obviously a little bit more than that, because in addition to the Safe and Supportive Schools grant for $100,000 this year, we will also do our normal grant making above and beyond that. So it'll be well over $100,000 in this fiscal year. So we've made a commitment. The board has seen a lot of demand for grants around that make our schools safe and welcoming and supportive to all students, and we've been supporting behavioral health, social emotional grants for a couple of years. So this partnership is really just it's nothing new. It's really kind of been gradual for the last couple of years. And then we had a conversation this fall that we really wanted to invest in a significant way to support something larger than the small innovations grants that we've been getting. And this is just a couple of examples of in 2017. So the Responsive Classroom Professional Development at the Gibbs School was a grant that we awarded last year. And innovations grants for Bracket Rainbow Alliance, the Unity Public Art Project that was here in the high school, and even mindfulness programs at the in the preschool at Anatomy have all kind of fallen under this umbrella, and a few 2016 grants as well. The next.
So as Amy's begun to speak about, this all started back specifically looking at safe and supportive schools and the self-assessments back in 2015 when AEF funded a grant at the district level, and they began the self-assessment there. I already spoke about this, so I won't spend too much time, but just to recap that this is a continuation of the work that was started back in 2015, and there's been a commitment throughout, which is really exciting. This shows some of the financial contributions towards, specifically through the grant making in relation to the social, emotional, and health related grants.
Right, you can see it's on the rise. This trend is nothing new. Yeah.
That was one of the reasons why we wanted to partner together to come up with something that was really comprehensive and well thought out, because we did see so many pockets popping up throughout the district that part of what AEF has really challenged us as a district to consider is how do we pull these together in a cohesive manner so that there's equitable access to every building. You know, we just heard about the Pierce Playground. How can we make sure that what we're offering in terms of creating safe and supportive schools is available regardless of what school you're going to? And that was one of the reasons AEF is charging us with doing this in an equitable manner across the grade levels, but also through the buildings. So one of the major elements of the district action plan this year is to really focus on creating the safe and supportive schools, and so this also aligns and helps us to further our district strategic plan. And one of the ways it's going to do that, there's two ways we're going to do that through the grant funding. The first way is to provide building leadership to carry out the action plans. So as a result of the funding from last year to complete the self-assessments, every building that completed the self-assessment has resulted in a really wonderful action plan that has since been embedded into their school improvement plans. And part of the funding from this AEF grant is going to provide stipends, materials, consultants, trainings as are necessary based on the individualized action plan at each building. So there's some discretion here for building teams to figure out the best way to further their action steps and to complement existing resources that exist at the building level. The proposals are going to be aligned with the district work, and they are going to go through approval through Julie Dunn, Rod McNeil, and myself to make sure that they align with the way the finances are being spent, the way the professional development and support is coming together with the curriculum, and through the SEL work that's happening in the district. This is something we shared back in October too. These were the results of our self-assessment. So as you can notice, what I highlighted back when we first met was that leadership and professional development tended to be trending towards the weaker side in terms of the self-assessment. And again, just to remind folks, this is unfair that they're next to one another because this is not the same assessment team going from school to school. It was each school's internal team doing a self-assessment on their own. So to compare a Stratton to a Dallin or a Bishop is actually not a comparable comparison. So just to remind folks about that. But on the whole, to look at the fact that two of the weakest areas across the board really fell into leadership and PD, that's where we focused the funds from AEF. So you heard about that in terms of leadership because the first portion of funding is going to go towards supporting the team to execute the leadership necessary at the building level to carry out their action plans. The second piece is going to be moving towards professional development. I actually didn't ask Karen, is this queued up to play? If it's not, that's okay too. So youth mental health first aid is a phenomenal professional learning, and it's a training that's across the country. It's actually international. It's all over the world. And across the board, all of the self-assessments came up with a weakness in professional learning and development, understanding what it actually means to create a safe and supportive school, what were the techniques that folks needed, but equally, how do adults in the building identify when somebody is at a risk for higher need, or how do they know that they're supporting the bulk of the universal needs and development of our young people in terms of creating safe spaces. So if it's not, it's totally fine. I'm not as entertaining as Brandon Marshall, who's an NFL star, who's in this clip here, but you can easily find it when you go to the Mental Health First Aid website. This has gotten a lot of press publicly because of how accessible it is and how effective it is. And so what Youth Mental Health First Aid is really supporting our knowledge of what mental health actually is. And if you go to the World Health Organization, their definition of mental health is a state of well-being in which the individual realizes his or her own abilities. They can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and are able to make a contribution to his or her community. Often when we think about mental health, we actually think of mental illness or mental health disorders or challenges. And what Mental Health First Aid is helping us to do is know and become extremely familiar with what typical and healthy mental health and development is for our young people. And then when do we know and acknowledge when it is not, and what do we do about it? How do we really empower the adults who are with students every single day to have the knowledge and the confidence to be able to support the mental health of all of their young people, and then on the occasions where they need a little bit more than what's in the classroom, how to help pass the baton to somebody who's an appropriate professional. Excuse me. So Youth Mental Health First Aid, and this is their definition. I like to highlight the major parts. It teaches, it's not for clinicians. This is something that teaches classroom teachers, food service workers, bus drivers, after-school providers, the coaches that are on the field, the clergy that work with our young people, the college students at the Boys and Girls Club or summer camps. Any person who is responsible for supervising and spending time with interacting with a young person is totally appropriate to become trained in Youth Mental Health First Aid. It's just like CPR, and it's just like medical first aid. We don't leave a CPR certification knowing how to do a I don't know, trach somebody's neck and stick in the tubes and help them do the surgery. Gosh, we would never do that. But we know when to call 911. And we know when somebody needs just a Band-Aid. And this is the equivalency if you're thinking about mental health. When do we provide the reassurance and the support? And then when do we call a qualified professional to come in? And when do we call emergency services? And believe it or not, that's a really foggy world to live in right now. If you had to think and test yourself, when would you know how to make those decisions? It's tricky. But once you leave this training, it's a lot less foggy, and all the reviews that have come out from staff who've done it have been really high praise for what they received from it. Let's see. Our plan in our first year is to train about 300 staff. And it's based on a model that we used for about 2 years in Reading with a federal grant program that was looking to do the same thing, which is to saturate the community with adults who've been trained in mental health first aid. And that's the same goal here in Arlington, is to really saturate the community. So again, no matter what building your student is in, they are interacting with an adult who has been certified as a mental health first aider anywhere that they go. So they have access to that support. And we can do that in about averaging one training a month. They cap out at about 30 people, so in about 10 to 12 months, we could probably get to 300 folks. And so that's our wonderfully ambitious goal. We're going to do that by training a cadre of instructors at our local level. So we're going to have an on-site instructor training to train hopefully about 25 to 30 adults who work within the district, so that we can then maintain the training, and then whenever we get new staff and there's turnover, everybody can have exposure to it and be certified in youth mental health first aid. As you can see, former First Lady Michelle Obama, Patrick Kennedy, Brandon Marshall, Lady Gaga, Dr. Oz, they have all participated in this training, and they all speak very highly of it. And they've gone on the record and have done a lot to promote it. That's how firmly they believe in it. We mentioned a bit of this too, but I just want to sort of reiterate what it is not. It's not therapy. It's not training a bunch of clinicians to go out into the world. But what it is rather helping to give people the skills and the literacy to feel confident and competent in their skills in terms of recognizing what is typical development for our young people, what's atypical, and then to know what to do when you notice that difference. Mental health first aid lives in that space between prevention and intervention. So in our health classes and our FACS classes, we receive wonderful prevention material, health education, understanding how to make healthy decisions in life. And then when we work with our counselors, social workers, we partner with AYCC and other folks, we've got really phenomenal treatment opportunities on that side. The space in between is you've received the prevention information, but how do we know what level of early intervention perhaps you need, which is that give the non-crisis first aid, so the equivalent of giving the Band-Aid, giving the ice pack medically. How do you do that for mental health? And then how do you know when to pass the baton on to the counselors? That's what mental health first aid is. That's all I got.
All right, thank you very much. Questions? Who has questions?
No.
Anybody have questions?
You talked about the different people besides the teachers and the administrative stuff, and at all levels. Those 300, are you looking to do cross-section of that, or are you looking, is there a core group that you're going to go for at the beginning, or?
That's great. We are going to start with administration. One of the major reasons is because if we're asking our staff to make this a priority and to create space, we need to know what we're asking them to do first off, and actually believe what we're asking. But secondarily, logistically, it's important to know what the parameters are to make it possible. And we need to have our leadership on board to smooth the way for that to happen.
Absolutely, makes sense. If I just follow up.
Yeah.
And that, the end goal will be to have everybody, bus drivers, secretaries.
Yeah, and actually the next group of people is to go to food service, and then maintenance staff, bus drivers to go there. You know, selfishly, there's you don't necessarily need substitute coverage. It's a little bit easier and faster sometimes to find an in-service day and things along those lines. And when we do end up working with teachers, there needs to be an equitable distribution across buildings, so we can't have 20 people missing from Dallin on a Tuesday for a training. So it's also making sure that we go through it in a strategic way, that we're not overtaxing building subs, we're not leaving too many kids without their teachers they have major relationships with. And we will start by targeting teachers from grades 3 through 12. Just because of the nature of adolescence that they talk about within the programming, it's most applicable to those grade levels and those ages. It will be offered to early education teachers, pre-K through 2, after the first round goes through, and the second round. And then we hope to expand it out to community members as well. So people who might not be employees of APS, but you know, town librarians and all of the other great folks that are in town.
That's the long-term vision of the youth mental health first aid training. The AEF portion is just that first year of those 300, right? And then the district can take it from there.
Take the torch.
Yes.
Did I understand correctly that you were initially starting doing this in Reading?
Yes.
Can you give any stories about anything that happened there?
Absolutely.
I mean, how it worked out?
In 2 years, we trained over 600 adults, and it was using a very same model, training a group of folks in the community. We had a mix of our school resource officer, our coalition director from the community, another detective at the police department, and then teachers, psychologists, administrators, central office staff, and TAs, I believe. We had a really great group of trainers who were all those different roles, so that we could make sure the trainers that were in front of different groups could speak to, this is what it's like as a teacher, this is what it's like as a TA, and so on. Worked really beautifully. It became actually a sustainable model, because once we exhausted the grant funds, we had already trained folks, and then you just need to replenish materials for anybody who needs to be newly certified, and you're certified then for 3 years, and then you do an online recertification, so it's quite simple to move through there. I will also say, I shared the surveys. There's a pre and a post survey for all the folks who take it in terms of how satisfied were you with the training, how confident do you feel in a number of different skills and skill sets. And without fail, on a Likert scale from 1 to 5, all the responses live in the 4 and the 5 section. There's no outliers that were below that. And having been there for 7 years, I knew the folks who were really naysayers for PD. They really didn't enjoy PD. It was a time that they could be better using and doing other activities. And it was really phenomenal to run a training with a couple of those folks and have them become so outspoken about how this was the most meaningful and most easily applied to their work that they do every day, PD. It was the best use of their time. They wish that every PD was that effective and resonant. So
can you talk
those are the stories I like to tell.
I know, it sounds great. Can you talk at all about how it affected the children? I mean, once everyone was trained?
Absolutely. So we actually started to track how we were referring students, how many young people were being met by the non-crisis mental health first aid elements, and how many were being handed off and referred to higher levels of care. And it was great because we really created a common language. It became a lot easier for folks to assess and say if it was or wasn't appropriate for the social worker or the guidance counselor, if it was or wasn't appropriate for the nurse. And then the clinical staff could also push back from outside and say, hey, why don't you talk about it in school? It seems like more of a school setting issue and less of a clinical issue. So we were able to communicate and work with one another a lot more effectively. Parents and families were also able to take the training through the community education branch of the town's work, and that was really great because then you had folks who were neighbors who were coming in and saying, I actually have the resources now and I know where to refer my neighbor, my niece, my nephew, my son, my daughter. And that was great because we had more kids being referred to services even without even going through the school because they had somebody else they were seeing outside. And the last piece I'd say about that is we did start tracking the numbers, as I started to mention, and staff were reporting that they felt much more comfortable responding to the non-crisis needs of students, and so the amount of students they were interacting with discussing their mental health, their typical development or atypical development seemed to increase across all of the levels for those folks for whom we got back survey data. Survey data is always hard to get back, but for what we got, it seemed to be an increase in how they felt speaking about it with young people and how many people access them.
Great, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Yep, go Jennifer.
So this is fabulous. This is a real need in the community. It has been for a while, and I'm really excited about how much attention both the administration and AEF is giving to this matter. It's very important.
Yeah.
I was wondering if parents are interested in learning more. Will there be potentially opportunities for parents to get trained? Should they go to the website first? What can parents do?
Yeah, we've talked about possibly partnering with community ed and offering it as through one of the trainers that get trained through this first push, offering it to the parents. But we do want to ultimately, I mean, police officers, like Sarah said, the whole community would benefit from that. How that gets funded is to be determined. That's probably, well, we don't know what year 2 and year 3 of the grant will look like. It's really going to see how year 1, what falls out of year 1. Whether that would be continuing the training or doing something else. So, unsure.
We can definitely set up a model where, if we partner with community ed, where the fees can fund the materials and at least a part of the trainer's time, depending on how they schedule it, make it happen. So it's very realistic. It's within grasp. Absolutely, I would say. The other thing I would say is that there are other communities around us that would like to have folks come and be trained as well. So it's another way to keep a sustainable model is if you also turn around and offer it to Lexington or Belmont, you may have a whole host of parents who then fill it up and then you can run a full course that way, which is great. The website is phenomenal. I would definitely check it out. It's mentalhealthfirstaid.org, I believe, or you could just Google it. There's a lot there.
And Lexington actually did have an initiative. They had their health department, I believe, offered it as a training for the community.
Arlington's public health department has offered it to in the last 2 years as well, and we've had staff from here take it as well as parents have taken it. It's a partnership with Somerville, Arlington, and Medford.
So Allison took it, and a number of social workers did too, right?
So far, our school nurses, our elementary social workers, and I have taken the course through the grant through public health, and this is fed into the plan to bring it into the district. Yeah.
Which is great.
Bill?
I just want to, the other day I was reading the article about how Arlington is one of the top 7 communities to live in thing, and from my perspective, without AEF, you're the cornerstone of everything that we've got going here. I've talked to teacher friends, and they keep saying, you're not the highest paid or anything. I said, well, we got something that no one else has, and that's AEF. And I think everyone in town knows about it, but I think there are a lot of people who don't know about it, and without you, we don't exist. So thank you for everything. I know it's not just you, Amy, but you're a big,
It's not just
you're,
me. No,
you're a big
not
part
just
of
me.
it. So thank you so much.
Me and 1,000 other donors every year.
We actually want to further that visibility, and so every person who goes through the training gets a handbook, and we want to put a nice big fat AEF sticker on top of it that says your training has been funded by the Arlington Education Foundation, just to increase some more of that visibility and drive people back to it.
Any questions? Yeah, Len.
Oh, well, I just actually we had discussed that a grant this size, just to be safe, should be accepted by the school committee. So I wanted to move that the Arlington Public Schools accept the grant for $100,485 from AEF.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That's unanimous. It's a good thing. It's a good start. I have one question. So when the funding, when the funding does stop, is this, how do we continue the work with, so this would be basically, John, he didn't show up for this discussion. He chickened out. Oh, you go, all right, yeah. So we would continue this we would continue this funding with our funds, with school district funds.
Yeah, and the ideally, the beautiful thing about it is once you train a group of instructors, the largest cost at that point has been removed, has been offset, which is fantastic.
Okay.
Right, and then once you have those 20 to 30 folks, they just need to maintain their certification, and the funds that are necessary are then for purchasing books, paying for substitutes where substitutes are necessary, and a stipend that accompanies the instructor to prepare the materials, register with the National Council, fill out all the paperwork that's necessary to license folks, and that's really it. And I do believe that if we plan it in a smart way that's taking the budget into consideration, we can take on the costs of the materials and the small stipends and the sub-coverage, and we can pace it out in a way that's digestible.
Yeah, so if there's an initial outlay that's high, and then
Yes.
that's a lot less. Okay.
Yes.
That clarifies everything for me.
Exactly. And now we're training everyone that's already here. In future years, we'll only have to train new folks.
Got it. Okay, great. All right. Thank you very much. Thanks, Len, for reminding us that we have to vote
Yep.
for that. Oh, you got it?
Just
Okay.
quick question. Is there any thought to making this part of a teacher certification from the state? Has anybody ever thought of that?
Great question.
Because for a while, CPR, they contemplated CPR being one of the issues to put it right in the undergraduate level. But I mean,
So I have two thoughts on that. One of them is there was conversation about whether or not there would be a 2-hour required suicide prevention training for all in-service educators a couple years back, but I believe it was contingent on funding or something along those lines. I'm not 100% sure. This would count as that more than enough for the 2 hours of suicide prevention training for everybody who's in service. So that's one element that the state has written somewhere on the books. The other piece is there's a whole organization actually for teacher ed incorporation of social emotional learning, adult SEL skills as part of teacher prep, and that's not for social workers and counselors, it's for your math teachers, your history teachers,
Right.
your early ed teachers, and so they've actually started to build some SEL requirements into the new teacher prep. This would be an element of that, but there's still a whole coalition working to deepen and broaden what that looks like.
thank you.
Yeah, it's a
Sorry.
great question.
That's okay.
And I thought of a really great YRBS question. It just popped up in response to your earlier one. The question that we ask is, what percentage of students feel like they have a trusted adult at school that they could speak with? And in the years prior to the Youth Mental Health First Aid, our numbers were around 70 or so at the high school. And after Youth Mental Health First Aid, they jumped up to high 80s and low 90s. So that felt really helpful and validating in that term.
That's great.
And I was just going to add, Sarah, you also saw changes in the safe and supportive school self-assessments from the teachers reporting back. So when people were doing self-assessments and saying they didn't have the professional development to respond to the needs of students, you saw changes in those survey results as
Immediately,
well.
yeah, when you look at the self-assessment. So a couple years later, so we've done the initial assessments in 2016, 2017, so odds are in 2019, 2020, we're going to revisit those self-assessments, and at that point in time, expect to see a huge jump in the PD scores for self-assessment and leadership too. Thank you all so much.
Thank you. Great. Thank you very much, Amy and everybody. Okay, now we have the budget presentations from Dr. Woods and Dr. Janger. Dr. Woods is coming up first, the superintendent tells me. Okay.
This item has been removed.
Good evening. I'm Eileen Woods, the interim principal at the Ottoson. The Ottoson community continues to appreciate and thank the members of the school committee, Superintendent Kathy Bodie and Assistant Superintendent Roderick McNeil for supporting the work of educating our Ottoson middle school learners. In addition, we'd like to thank the Arlington community, the Arlington Education Foundation, and the Ottoson Parent Advisory Council for their continued financial support. This academic year, the 1,264 Ottoson students have benefited greatly from the additional staffing of a 0.5 adjustment counselor to address the social emotional needs of our learners, as well as the needed curriculum materials. This year's budget requests are recommended based on conversations and input from the Ottoson teachers, administrators, the School Improvement Council, and department chairs. Our key levers continue to be quality teaching and learning, academic rigor, social emotional learning, and individualized student learning. As a transitional leader this year, the work has been centered on social emotional and cultural proficiency instruction, the transitioning of the Ottoson 7th and 8th grade school, and ensuring a safe and supportive school climate for all learners. An important focus has also been on responsive discipline. We planned to accomplish this by integrating safety, civility, and social identity into our practice, as well as examining bias and justice. And I'm happy to say that we have seen a decrease in discipline infractions at the Ottoson in terms of detentions and suspensions. Ottoson educators continue to engage in professional development in order to provide students with powerful teaching practices, which will foster student achievement. Our educators continue to be committed to understanding the factors affecting student performance and social emotional learning. We look to continue funding professional development work. We realize that every year prioritizing a budget has its challenges, and we are mindful of looking at our resources and practices in a different way, but wish to frame the needs for the 2018-2019 academic year for the 7th and 8th grade Ottoson students and staff. The middle school years occur during a critical development period for students, and this provides us with a unique opportunity as educators and an important charge. Providing students with the necessary tools and the foundation that will enable them to become responsible and capable citizens and contributing members of the community. This is not only accomplished through academic rigor, but through learning and practice of social, emotional, and competencies that will be required throughout their life. With these needs in mind, the budget priorities for the Ottoson align with the system goals. We are requesting 4 cluster teachers for the 7th and 8th graders, moving away from the split cluster model. The recommendation is based on the enrollment for next year's 7th grade class of 445 learners and 8th grade class of 414 learners. This will result in lower class size, which impacts how teachers instruct and engage with students. This will help to create a schedule with more availability to take specific languages, coordinate if a student bypasses a math level, and give teachers common planning time, and create even numbers of students in sections of a given course. Next year, 2 of the Artisan Adjustment Counselors will be going to the Gibbs. Therefore, we are requesting a 1.5 adjustment counselors in order to maintain 2 at each grade level, which will help our students who are increasingly affected by many social forces impacting their role as learners. We look to be proactive in developing strategies to increase academic success, assist with conflict resolution, and help our students develop appropriate social skills and assist students in understanding their role in the greater community. In addition, there is a budget need to purchase more social emotional learning supplies for artisan students, professional development, and course reimbursement for teachers. Teaching assistants allow artisan teachers to provide increased opportunities to learn, more time to spend with students and on academic tasks, and increased ability to assess learning and provide meaningful feedback. The classroom is a dynamic place, constantly changing based on the complexities of students and the multifaceted components of the curriculum. Developing problem-solving and thinking skills in students takes time for the teacher to collaborate with students to bring out and enhance the ability at deep levels. Artisan teachers work hard to understand each student's skill level, to enrich, review, or practice. They need to be able to provide times for students to engage in quality lessons, build supportive relationships, and get in-depth feedback on their assignments. As a result of differentiation, individualization, come developing varied groupings which teaching assistants can support. In these small groups, in-depth understanding is developed through experimentation, discussion, and project-based learning. All these groups need physical space in an inclusion classroom. We are asking for 2 teaching assistants to support the model. Additionally, due to increased enrollment in the present 6th grade class, we are asking for a .2 world language teacher for Spanish. Our Spanish classes size is well over 25 in many of the classes and approaching 30. We anticipate continued high levels of enrollment in this language next year. A request for a .4 increase in the visual art teacher is centered on, after a 1.0 teacher goes to the Gibbs, that we will need 2.0 teachers remaining at the Artisan to support the work in art, especially the digital lab work. Also, funding visual art supplies is needed. While enrollment has grown, funding for art supplies has not increased, and the department has added the digital component to the curriculum. Science textbooks and periodicals. This curriculum update is needed to align with the science standards and provide the needed resources for science instruction. This would be a $25,000 ask. The Artisan music needs are funded for instructional materials, maintenance services, performing arts, revised curriculum materials, performing arts association membership, performing arts professional conferences, and performing arts supplies. Specific for the Artisan, to purchase essential choral sheet music to build, sustain, and replace items in the choral library. This is for chorus, 7th and 8th grade girls, boys, chorus, acoustics and keynote, ensemble, chamber orchestra, 7th and 8th grade band, jazz band, and miscellaneous supplies such as headphones, guitar, strings, storage boxes, and instrumental supplies are needed, as well as folding music stands for band and orchestra to replace older ones. In closing, I just want to say that this is an exciting time of change and opportunity for the Artisan middle school community. Our safe and supportive school committee look to the year 2020 Where all our efforts will be realized, this important work will enable students to have increased self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making that lay the groundwork for needed life skills. This will help them as they move through the Arlington Public Schools and beyond. Thank you for allowing me to serve the Ottoson Middle School these past 2 years and through this exciting time. I look forward to a smooth transition with the new leadership in the spring.
Thank you, Dr. Woods. Cindy.
2 questions. How many FTEs do we need to get to 4 clusters for 7th and 8th grade?
5.
5.
2 English, 2 math, 1 science.
Okay, 5 FTEs. And what are adjustment counselors versus social workers or guidance counselors?
Adjustment counselor, well, many of our adjustment counselors are social workers as well, you know. The social work is presently in the model, and actually this will be a new vision with our new social emotional director, but the social workers right now are connected to the individual educational plans, and they provide a different service from the guidance counselors, but our guidance counselors are all certified social workers.
Yeah. So
what is if we look at the staffing, how many social workers, guidance counselors, and adjustment counselors do we have?
So
We have presently 2 going to the Gibbs, so we have 4.5 at the Ottoson adjustment counselors. And so we have 2 going to the Gibbs.
Okay.
So we need 1.5 to make 2 for the 7th grade and 2 for, that's the plan.
How many
2
social
7th
workers and how many guidance counselors?
And we have, let's see, 1.5 will remain at Ottoson social workers. And we have a, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. I don't know.
And we have a 0.5 social worker going to the Gibbs, I think. Is it a 0.5 or 1.0?
There's currently 2.5 special ed social workers and 4.5 guidance counselors, but an adjustment counselor is the title they use for their license for school. It's the same position.
The license that is issued by the Department of Education is school social worker / school adjustment counselor. So when you say adjustment counselor, that's the license they have, the school social worker, school adjustment counselor. There's also a school guidance counselor license. A lot of the people in the guidance department all have, most of them have the guidance counselor license, and they all have the school, either a licensed certified social worker, licensed clinical social worker, or school social worker, school adjustment counselor, and several have the school guidance counselor license as well. But they're in the guidance department, and they're performing the guidance functions, and which include school adjustment counseling work, and then the social workers in the special ed department are focused more on clinical work with students on IEPs.
Right. Okay. I was just trying to make so in my school we have 1 guidance counselor per grade and 1 social worker who serves the entire school. So I'm trying to do the math. I'm just trying to see what the equivalent is. That's all. All right. Cool. Thank you.
We made a decision a number of years ago. We do not hire anyone at the middle school just with guidance counselor certification. Either someone has to have the school adjustment or they have to have a social work background.
Okay. First, the bad news. We're going to cut your budget by 1/3. Got to send it off to the Gibbs. What I'm having a little trouble comprehending right now is how much of the ask is for things that are inherent based on the surge in enrollment in grades 6, 7, and 8, and how much of this is necessary in order to provide equity between the Gibbs and the Ottoson.
Yeah, well, I think it's probably a combination of both.
I figured that I figured that this is a group of asks that are really tied to either one of the two issues. Nothing here is expanding services. It seems to be things that are maintaining current levels of services.
But there's a big increase in enrollment in the sixth grade, So, and I think that will continue. And this, so I think it's really both. I mean, obviously, you know, in terms of the Gibbs, the clusters will be 5 clusters, and to bring Audison to 4 clusters next year, when it buys a year for when the students come in from the Gibbs, they're coming in from clusters that are 5 clusters. So, and I also think with the complexity of classrooms today and all of the needs of students, I think that, you know, asking to bring it up to 4 is a very reasonable ask, and probably was an ask even last year. So, yeah.
No, I recognize the issues that we're facing here, and as I mentioned last night, the elementary folks, is that our first priority is establishing the 2 schools equitably based on what we're doing right now, because we shouldn't be reducing levels of service simply because we've outgrown 1 building and we need to split out to 2. So that in terms of my mind thinking about what we need to do going forward budgetarily, and you've got a much more complicated situation than anybody else who's coming before us, is to sort of graph out the asks and the needs vis-a-vis, we've got 100 more kids, what are we going to do with them, versus total versus, okay, this is what we need to do in order to split the school into 2 pieces equitably.
Yeah. And I think that's happening, actually. I really do believe that's happening between the Gibbs and the Audison.
Oh, I'm sure it is. I'm sure it is.
I mean, I think, you know, we've been very thoughtful and planful about, you know, teachers going there and what's remaining at Audison, and so forth.
Yeah, and know that I don't want to get into the day-to-day operations of school or interfere with the people who have to live there, because they should have the majority, the parents and the kids and the people who live in the building should have the majority voice. As our view is sort of the board of directors of all this thing, to fund it and understand and communicate to the community what's going on and what our needs are. So, you know, that's sort of the position I'm coming from, is that for me to be able to understand it to the depth I need to advocate for it and to explain it, you know, that's sort of the next level of the presentation. I know it's being worked on, I know it's being done, but I think that as we approach budget season, we're going to be starting to talk in January about how we're going to meet our needs and what we're going to advocate for. I really need that clear understanding. And that's probably the most critical thing for me to do, because this is the biggest difference between what we're doing this year and what we need to do next.
I would ask the administration, I'm not totally sure who to be asking, but I need to see a spreadsheet where we've got this year and next year is divided into just moving people over, and then what are the desired additions, and then the desired result. So we'd have students at different levels, we'd have how many teachers, we'd have how many clusters, we'd have how many art teachers, you know, all these different things. And I think you could pretty easily make it into a spreadsheet, and then we can look at it and get, I'm having a hard time, just like Paul was saying, understanding, because we're splitting and we're growing. And I'm trying to absorb, I'm trying to be able to understand which is splitting, which is growing, which is both, and see. So I think you could get it in the spreadsheet.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, we've been working from spreadsheets on this. I think that when we give you our best recommendation for how to prioritize, that what we will do is give you exactly that. that is how many teachers are we going to have in each discipline, which is something actually we pretty much know right now, and also how many teachers will be at the Addison next year. The request right now is for both 7th and 8th grade to go to the change from 7th to 8th next year is going to be very little, maybe 10 students difference. But there is going to be a big jump in the 7th grade next year from what's currently there. And that's sort of one of the hearts of what we're looking at. And with respect to school adjustment counselors, we have contractual language around ratios that we have to abide by.
Yeah, go ahead.
It'd be helpful for me to see the asks also in their own spreadsheet, not just what the proposal is.
Don't they have the do they have the spreadsheets?
We didn't.
last time.
We didn't have it.
Yeah, I don't see
got-
it.
we
I
got
didn't
one.
see it.
We got one.
We got one last week, but
Yeah.
nothing.
Nothing from this
And I'm
level.
talking the spreadsheet that I'm talking about where it's this year, next
Right.
year.
We didn't get
and-
that
yeah,
at all.
nothing.
You do not have next year. What we have is a spreadsheet right now in terms of what all the asks are. That.
I'm
We didn't get the
talking-
secondary.
I'm trying to talk about Addison and Gibbs and a spreadsheet that capture, I don't know that this exists, but I think it could, and I don't think it'd be that hard to put together, but
It's,
just.
It does exist, certainly exists for Gibbs. We have to do that for Addison, and when we come to you in January, we can give that, in fact, at your very first meeting, because that's where we're going to be talking about our recommendations. We'll give you that information.
But I'd like to see the asks, not just what the recommendations are, because if you're pulling back, I'd like.
You're hearing right now.
Right, but I need to see them in the spreadsheet. I need to see the numbers. It's too hard to understand by text. I need to see where the numbers are moving to.
Okay, Len had his hand up, then you, so.
Okay.
Len.
Thanks. So, like we said with the elementary principals last week, we're not able to fund everything, all of everybody's asks. We already know that based on the macro picture. So there will be some prioritization that's required that, you'll have to do with the other administrators. Certainly, my daughter's in 6th grade. Those clusters are very large, 127 kids in her cluster, so very large cluster. So I'm glad to see the recommendation for 7th grade to go to 4 full clusters. For 8th grade, you've got a situation there where you've hired 2 teachers specifically to be, 2 subject teachers. Maybe that can go like that again for another year, and maybe that isn't such a priority. Or maybe it is a greater priority than the adjustment counselor. I don't know, you have to balance and figure that out.
Right.
But we will be looking to you for your recommendations as to what are the priorities, given that we aren't able to fund everything.
Thank you.
Jennifer?
So I guess this is a question for Dr. Bodie. I know when we were figuring out what sort of the Gibbs would cost us and going to the town and saying this is what we think a new school is going to cost, it seems like some of these expenses are basically the consequence of opening a new school. And I'm wondering, were the consequences here, I'm getting at the same things that Mr. Slickman was asking, in that ask to the town, so the additions that we need to make at Addison are basically a consequence of the fact that we're opening a new school. Some of them are. So is that part of the ask that we've made to the town, or have we not made that ask in terms of these requests?
We certainly have. In fact, right now, and this number may actually adjust up a little bit, we have $1.2 million is the request for next year. And that is part of the differential.
It doesn't just cover stuff at Gibbs, it could potentially cover stuff at Addison too.
Well, it's not so much at Addison, it's what happens in terms of, if you move somebody to Gibbs, what do you need to do to make sure that you are whole? And it's just a really question of where that FTE exists. And some of it is part of that, for sure. So when we go through our prioritization, we have to look at what FTEs have been set aside for art, for example, already covered in the Gibbs budget, anticipating that with the current 6th grade moving to 7th grade, we're going to need some additional FTEs to cover the sections. Otherwise, we're going to have, one, it's going to be very difficult to schedule, and two, the classes are going to be very large. So some of that has already been anticipated. In fact, one of the things was mentioned by Dr. Woods is the 0.4 for art. I already anticipated that in the Gibbs budget.
Got it. Okay.
So we will be working side by side with both those.
Okay, great, thanks.
I just wanted to give some perspective also on the size of these clusters. I work, where I work, I teach 6th grade. I have 89 students in a cluster. 92 is, I think, our biggest cluster. So these clusters, even if we up them to 4, have over 100 students in them. I would really like to see some kind of understanding of what cluster size is, because that helps us understand what the load is for teachers as well. So 6th grade, 7th grade, and 8th grade, you know, all of our clusters should actually be less than 100, really.
Well, the union president just noted that. I saw.
Really thinking, if we're really thinking about how we want to reach students, you know, one teacher with more than 100 students is not going to able to give them what they need.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, one more just low question. The 2 additional teaching assistants, are those sort of akin to building subs? Is that, or how would they be used in particular classrooms?
They would be used in classrooms to support.
But they would float potentially, or they'd be dedicated to a
well, presently, we looked at the inclusion model, and we needed 2 more to support, particularly in the area of science, when kids are engaged in labs and social studies.
Got it. Okay. So thanks.
So, what I think would be helpful would, and this would answer some questions that I have, and I think members of the public have, which is, what did it cost to educate 6th, 7th, and 8th graders in FY17, and what will it cost to educate 6th, 7th, and 8th graders in FY18? And that's what we need to know, and that's all costs in, and then you can do an Excel spreadsheet with a, you know, enrollment, FY17 enrollment in those 3 grades, FY18 enrollment in those 3 grades, and then people can draw conclusions as to what impact the enrollment had on increasing costs, and what impact just having 2 separate buildings has on costs. So I think that's really what what people want to know. What did it cost this year to educate 6th, 7th, and 8th graders? What's it going to cost next year? And then with the costs broken out, administrative, you know, all that, as best you can. I think that's the way to do that. All right.
Okay.
Good to see you again, Dr. Woods.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Dr. Janger. Now, we haven't any department heads, or are they just here to?
No. We introduce everybody. Yeah. Actually, would all of you introduce yourselves?
Why don't you come? You got to come up to the microphone and get up. No, you can't. You guys need a wireless. We need a wireless, but yeah. Or maybe just tell us. Maybe Matt. Maybe just tell everybody who's here.
Okay, we have here. If I get your name wrong, don't let him know. We have most of the department heads. We have Jack Berry, English department head. Matt Coleman, mathematics. Denny Conklin's history. Behind Denny is Larry Weathers, who is science. Hiding back there in the corner is Bill Papazissis, who's performing arts. We have Tricia Bella Rossi, who is our family and consumer sciences lead teacher. And you all know Sarah. So
great, thank you. All right, thank you.
The middle school presentation is always a hard act to follow. I find actually every year I give a version of the same presentation. And my goal is not to go through all of the details. I focus primarily on the specifics of the personnel requests. And then at the bottom, I talk more generally about other areas that I know we're working out in detail with the business manager and with Dr. Bodie. So I don't go into numbers there. I simply sort of give the rationale for why those things are important to pay attention to, and figure that the final line items will make it into the request that you get. Just as the middle school is working on educating the whole child, the high school is very much focusing on continuing to have a rigorous curriculum rigorous engagement with students, engagement and differentiation for levels of student performance, as well as putting a huge amount of effort into building what we call a learning, well, the phrase from the mission is learning, connecting, and caring as a safe, supportive, and inclusive community. The real goal of trying to create a positive culture to gain the value of all of the positive impacts that that has on student learning and student growth is important. When we talk about budget issues, the main issue at the high school, every year that I have been there, has been twofold: enrollment, and enrollment. I think that's threefold, like as they say with real estate. We currently enroll 1,328 students, last time I looked. The building is 400,000 square feet. We use only about half of that for educational purposes, and that goes to the inefficiency of the building and the needs for repair. The building has grown by 111 students in this is now my 5th year in the 4 years that I've been making this presentation. And during that time, each year we've come to you with an ask that says this is how much we need to keep pace just with enrollment growth. We've also made the case that the high school has been a little bit behind in terms of overall staffing levels. Each year we've gotten a little less than we need to keep up with enrollment growth. And so each year we've fallen increasingly further behind. It's a huge testament to the high school staff that we've found ways to spread that one piece of butter over 3 pieces of toast year after year and continue to really have an enormously positive outcome. I list sort of kudos at the beginning of my speech, but I think it is important to know that Arlington High School, building on the success of our elementary and our middle, by the time you get to Arlington High School, turns out students who are performing at the highest levels. We've talked about the PISA exams, we've looked at MCAS scores, we look at the U.S. News World Report, we look at Newsweek. Everybody who rates and ranks schools finds that our students not only are learning not universally, but overwhelmingly at high levels and in depth. So those things are really important. And every year, because public education sometimes takes a bit of a bad rap, I point out that Massachusetts, or a country, performs on international comparisons at the level of the best performing countries in the world. So you are talking about one of the best schools, one of the best school systems, and one of the best public school systems in the world. Given that, my first year I asked Dr. Bodie, looking at staffing and looking at the condition of the facilities, was I allowed to say that this is unsustainable? And she said yes, which was one of the reasons I knew I was going to like working with her right from the start. It's very difficult to sustain. We continue to put increasing amounts of pressure on the students and the teachers. At this point, the high school, because of the way we organize students in classes, has been able to hide a lot of the growth. So every year that I have been here, we have continued to fund and staff the core academic departments, the departments in which students take their most required credits: English, math, science, social studies, and world language. That has been at the expense of departments that either have less required credits or no required credits, which is art, PE, and the other electives. The result of that over the years has been that those classes have all been full. They become harder and harder for students to schedule in. And this year, really, it became much more apparent than it's ever been that students simply could not change their schedules in September. If you wanted or needed to change from one class to another, there was, even if there was room in the English class you were switching into, you couldn't switch into the class in art or the class in PE because those were all full. And that creates some very stressful discontinuities and more holes in kids' schedules. So one of the things that's hard to compare when we look across and make the apples to oranges comparisons, elementary to middle to high, is we've actually this year got better ratios in many of the core academic, those 5 departments, because that's where we've pushed our energy into, but we're still really struggling for staff. So that breaks down as follows. As I said, we've grown 111 students in the last 4 years. We're destined to grow 76 students by my most recent estimate, and there's a table as to that, to 1,328 next year, 1,406 the year after, and 1,460. The demographic bomb that has hit the middle school over the last 3 years is hitting us now with the bigger surge. And that's something we really need to address. So if you simply do the back of the envelope What does it take to staff? This isn't to keep up with a 6% increase. A 6% increase in students, which is what this is, would be a little over 6 teachers. But simply to staff the classes that those students are going to require, you would need 5.3 additional FTE. I'm going to list through 7.2 FTE worth of requests, which gets us, I think, a little closer to where we should have been in the first place. I have not done the comparison to some ideal target, which would be where we'd want to be. But just to understand that even this is a relatively frugal request. So going fairly quickly, every year I've done this in 2 parts, things we absolutely need for core classes and electives. This year was too complicated. I had to break it into 6. I apologize. First, something we've asked for every year, and we very much appreciate that the school committee let us move in this direction this year. It's something that in every year as we've gone through the process of asking staff, administration, and department heads what their priorities were. Much to my surprise, their first priority each year has been to have a 3rd dean. So last year we created the .6 dean position with a plan and expectation that that would move to full-time this year. And so we continue to support that .4 additional FTE to make the dean full-time. And I'll talk a little bit more about the positive impact which having the dean support has had on discipline and other things that we've done in the school. Next, looking simply at what we need to maintain enrollment, classes that are required for enrollment. We've looked at English, history, science, and world languages. Math is managed to do magical math, as they are good at doing, and so they're not requesting anyone for growth this year. But we're looking at 2.4 FTE simply to fund the 3 additional classes that 76 students would require in each of those departments. To provide those missing electives, we're looking for 2.2 FTE in art, PE, and electives. That breaks out, as you can see, 0.6 art, 0.2 for performing arts, 0.6 for PE, 0.2 for history. The history department has grown the fastest because in the absence of electives and also because they're great teachers with great offerings, everybody else caught up and then everybody flowed into the history department. And so the history department now has roughly 35% of their classes that are over 25 students, many over 27. English department 0.2 and family and consumer science 0.4. Another area that we really are excited about is that in the last couple of years, we've been looking at co-teaching in our Curriculum B classes. And just to clarify, right now in Arlington, we have the AP honors level, then we have Curriculum A, which is considered to be college prep. So students with a Curriculum A education are supposed to be graduating college and career ready. Over the years, we've created a Curriculum B level, which is a modified standard expectation, and then there are also special education classes. The Curriculum B is a level we're not super happy with. The idea that we are basically saying to students, these classes are not preparing you to be college and career ready is problematic. And so over the last couple of years, we've had these co-taught classes, special education and general ed. General ed students are in there. Some special education students receive their education in those classes. And what we found is that even though we are calling them Curriculum B classes, thanks to the efforts and high expectations of our teachers, those co-taught classes are able to teach students to a Curriculum A standard. They modify the way in which they reach the standard. They simplify and focus on the essential parts of those standards, but they're reaching those students to that level. And to move away from having those low expectations, and frankly, to better serve our students, we really want to implement both the co-taught model across all of the required classes and be able to eventually, relatively quickly, I hope, do away with the Curriculum E standard and to go back to having all of our students be in college and career-ready classes. So in order to do that, there are a few sections that still need to be filled. So we would need 2 sections, that's 0.4 in science, 0.2 in history, a 0.2 in math, and a 0.2 for ELL inclusion support. Right now, we have a growing number of ELL students who come in level 1, many of them with interrupted educations. In the absence of any other small cohort place to put them, they've been placed somewhat, not inappropriately, but it's not the best way to serve those students to place them in those Curriculum B classes necessarily. And so really we would like to move them towards an inclusion model with support to be in the regular classes. So that's part of that request. In addition to curriculum growth, our World Language Department comes under a different kind of pressure because essentially the World Language Department is 5 separate departments. Sometimes science has this problem. But if you're a Spanish teacher, you can't switch over and teach French unless you happen to be dual certified. Right now we offer French, Spanish, Italian, Latin, and Mandarin. In order to support the higher level classes that are now occurring, particularly in Italian and Mandarin, we need a few more sections. And so that's a request for 0.6 students to support that program. And lastly, we are now at 1,300 and, well, we're now 1,330 going to 1,406. If you divide that by 5 guidance counselors, our current caseload for guidance counselors is 270 students. If our caseload is over 250 students, NEAS requires me to check a box on their report because that is not the desired level. If you look at the local communities that we compare ourselves to, the highest ratio in all of the 12 surrounding communities is 250 students. And if you look at the standards in the guidance, I can't remember the acronym, Sarah can tell you, but if you look at the National Association that would make recommendations on this, the maximum caseload is 250 students. Next year, without this 0.6, we'll have the guidance counselors at a 280 student caseload. And as you can imagine, if we're looking at social emotional learning, if we're looking at placing students appropriately, and if we're looking at getting them into the most competitive colleges, it's really important to have a successful guidance department. So those are the primary asks in terms of staffing. Then just because I get to sit up here for a little bit and sort of talk about what it is we're doing, Dr. Bodie said I should take the opportunity, so I never will turn down an opportunity to tout the great things going on at the high school. This year, just like the entire district, Arlington High School has really been focusing on what we're calling community building. So we look at the district goals of cultural competency, we look at the district goals around social emotional learning, we look at the district goals around personalized learning, and we look at the work we've been doing over the last 4 years at building a positive and inclusive climate, and we were looking for a big tent to put that under, and what we're calling that is community building, because the goal is to build that safe, supportive, and inclusive community. So this year, major focuses of that have been the creation of the Community Building Coordinating Committee. That group has subgroups that are working on communication, planning, and data collection in terms of being able to measure and identify areas of concern and also to track our progress. We had Wellness Day, which was yesterday. I have been so busy, I have yet to write out my incredibly excited thanks to all the folks who organized it. I thought it was a lot of fun. I was reading actually the 550 students who filled out the feedback survey, which is a pretty high level of response, and it was really overwhelmingly positive. We'll be having Inclusion Day in the spring, which will be a similar model. In addition, the administrative team and most of the student study team, which is guidance, social work, nursing, and then the entire staff have at different levels been trained in an approach called collaborative problem solving. Collaborative problem solving is a program trained by Mass General Hospital, a program called Think Kids. And the idea, it's a program that looks at how you do student discipline in a supportive way. The fundamental idea of collaborative problem solving is really simple. It's kids succeed if they can. And the fellow says this is sort of a joke at the beginning of the training, but although that makes a lot of sense when you say it out loud, most of our discipline is based on the theory that kids succeed if they want to. And then we set about making them want to if they don't. The basic research shows that things like detentions and suspensions work to make kids understand that we are serious about the rules and limits. It's not that having rules and limits are unnecessary, but by the 3rd time you've given a kid a detention for having too many suspensions, or you've given a kid a detention for not being able to sit still in class, it's probable that that's not going to work. And so the issue then becomes dealing with lagging skills and unsolved problems and working with the student to be able to address those. So we are rolling out a fairly high degree of training on that, and we're very excited about that. As you can imagine, doing that takes time. It takes more focus and more energy. We have seen a significant drop in suspensions this year. We saw a major drop in suspensions when we started 4 years ago. It crept up last year as discipline ran into two unfortunate trends. One was the legalization of marijuana, which gave a negative message to students about behavior in school. And the other was the current political environment, which led to some unpleasant behaviors in school. So we saw an uptick last year, but we're seeing a significant reduction this year. We hope, as best we can track it. And then I also just want to thank the school committee. 4 years ago, we made a big pitch for improving digital technology access by staff, and then access within the school, and then access by students. Last year, we piloted the Bring Your Own Device program. That has now become the expectation and norm in the high school, but it's something we can't keep our eye off of. Unfortunately, those wonderful new MacBooks that we got 4 years ago are now 4 years old. I know that many teachers have experienced what I experienced. My 4-year-old MacBook suddenly began to wheeze and sputter and just spin every time I would try to do anything. Fortunately, computers have gotten to the point where the $1,000 MacBook is not necessary for every student, for every teacher, for every need. And so this year, we appreciated the Capital Committee giving us $40,000 last year and $40,000 this year. That was enough to give 2/3 of our staff new MacBooks. And so this year we've piloted Chromebooks for about half of the replacements, and they seem to be effective for many teachers. And so we're expecting to do some version of a mixed rollout next year. If a teacher doesn't need to have a MacBook, we'll let them use a Chromebook. But we also want to make sure that for teachers who are doing more advanced work or making more extensive use of technology, that they have access to the technology. The other thing is that points to AEF. AEF was instrumental in helping us get to this point where we really have a very rich use of technology in the district. They've funded our makerspace, they funded our digital media lab, they funded our digital music lab, they funded our computer science lab. All of those different programs have been supported by them. Unfortunately, just like the 4-year-old MacBooks, those are also starting to feel their age, and we need to make sure that those are represented appropriately in the capital campaign. We've given those numbers to the folks who need them, and they'll talk to you about them later. And last and absolutely not least, if you didn't know it, we're planning on building a new high school. It's going to cost a little bit. It's going to take a lot of work. We're super excited about it. Over the next 3 months, we're going to be working on the education plan. We've sent out that invitation to you in the community. We hope everybody will get involved. There are two things that I think are important to note. One is that we still have this old building. We're going to be in the current building for at least another 3 years, and parts of this building will probably be in use for another 5 to 6 years before they get fixed. We don't know the exact rollout time, but we have to be prepared for that. There are 1,330 students currently in the building. There will be 1,500 plus in the building before we start digging. And the building is feeling both the space pinch as a result of that and a facilities pinch as a result of that. And it is hard every year to justify putting $10,000 into moving walls or $5,000 into fixing a door. But if we don't, we will see a very rapid spiral because the building just breaks fairly easily. Conversations with the facilities department, they would say, we put $10,000 into doors this summer. And I was like, but we didn't replace any of them. We just fixed the substandard doors. And another 6 months of kids doing this very hard. I yelled at a kid as I came in to this meeting because he was pounding on the door. They'll break again, and they'll have to be repaired, and they'll have to be repaired. So I just encourage people to not get sticker shock. We have to create 2 to 3 more classrooms to accommodate these students. We need to fix security. Our security cameras are not particularly sufficient to allow us to monitor the big facility. They're not cheap to fix and improve, but they're a lot cheaper than hiring multiple building subs to walk around the building. And they really are very helpful in keeping our students safe. And then last but not least on that, it is important to remember that this process is going to put a huge burden on the administration. We're getting already now daily emails from the architects about people who are coming in to access various parts of the building to measure things. Today we were getting a lot of joking emails about sharks with lasers on their heads because they were measuring the outside of the building with lasers. So of course the staff sent us lots and lots of funny emails about it. But there's lots of people all over the building and they take a lot of time. And so again, another pitch for making sure that we fund that third dean in order to make sure that we're doing as good a job as we can at supporting the teachers with their already large caseloads. So thank you very much. I appreciate you giving me the chance to talk about this. And I look forward to any questions.
Thank you, Matt. Questions?
I don't have a question, actually. I just want, when we do get those spreadsheets, to make sure that we list the equipment as well as the FTE requests, so we have an idea. Sometimes those can be easier to fund with one-time, money from someplace else. So just have a clear idea of what those requests are. Yeah, that'd be great.
Just have one. I think I asked this once of Laura in the past. Bring your own device. In the past, when schools sponsor it, the families get a break in the cost. I don't know if that still exists or not, and if it does, is that something we're going to participate in?
So our bring your own model, there are different approaches schools have to bring your own. Some schools send everybody a letter and say, you need to go buy yourself a $300 computer in order to come to school. We have not done that. I'll say on camera, I don't think that's okay when districts do that. I believe that students are entitled to a free education. So anything that we require outside of sort of basic supplies, if it's really necessary, not helpful, we should be helping to pay for it. So the answer to that is we have student devices available in the building. Teachers can get their hands on 10 devices. The students can get access to devices in the library.
Okay, I wasn't clear. I apologize. The program I'm talking about allows educators and students to buy software and hardware at a discount. I guess what I'm asking is the possibility, I still get my software for my computer because I'm still listed as an adjunct professor at Fitchburg State. It's an educational pricing that hardware companies and software companies provide education and stuff. I'm not saying that everyone should buy it. I'm just saying we should take advantage of it if we look into it. It's not something that costs the district anything. It's good PR and providing everybody something like that. It's connecting with the major hardware and software companies. I'm not sure if it still exists. I know it still exists through Fitchburg State, and I've been able to take advantage of that.
So right now, our recommended BYOD device is a Chromebook, which runs about $250. Right. The software is free. And the platform that we're using is Google Apps for Education, which is also free. But I think if we can find about educational discounts and let people know about it, right, I'm sure they'd appreciate it.
Thank you.
So just a question about, as you've been adding staff in the past and in this request, it's always been 0.2, 0.4, 0.6. Is it harder to hire people into those part-time positions than, say, waiting another year and then when you need a full-time person? Or how has that been working with?
I really appreciate your asking that question. So not all of, when we finally get the number from you and we then start figuring out how to post, not all of those 0.6s get posted as 0.6s. But it is incredibly helpful. If we get a 1.2 and then we'll see about a 1.0 more later, then that really does become a problem. We've had the situation last year as it got really tight where we were posting for very small part-time positions or we were forced to post very late in the year. So part of it is knowing what our ability is to post early because if we're going to get the best teachers, we're going to post in February and March. We've been incredibly lucky that Arlington has the poll, that we have posted things in August and had teachers who I would have been thrilled to hire in January show up. The difference becomes we have the one teacher who we're thrilled to hire, whereas when we hire in February, we have 4 teachers and we have a hard decision to make. And certainly we've had some challenges with the part-time positions where you really call on everybody you know to find out if some retired person or some person who's just moved to town is, and then you don't hold on to those people because if they are good, they want to move up to a full-time position somewhere.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, Arlington Education Association, so we're going to hear from Jason. Thank you. On both the Addison and the high school, right?
Yes,
okay.
I'll do both presentations.
All right, thank you.
And now I have two tough acts to follow.
Yeah.
Addison budget requests for FY19, additional staffing. We're requesting 4 7th grade and 4 8th grade clusters. Student enrollment continues to increase. Based off this year's 6th and 7th grade student enrollment, if there were 4 clusters for 7th and 8th grade, that would mean that each 7th grade cluster would average 111 students, and each 8th grade cluster would average 103 students. This would provide an appropriate learning environment and class sizes. An additional 0.4 visual arts teacher, increase in teaching assistants for inclusion, 1 for 7th grade, 1 for 8th grade, an additional 1.5 guidance counselor, an additional 0.2 FTE world language teacher for Spanish. The visual arts and world language requests are needed with the increase of student enrollment. As we raise the expectations of students and with the increase of students with special and social emotional needs, students and teachers need a greater support system. An increase of teaching assistants and guidance counselors will help with this. Curriculum and professional development, science textbooks and periodicals, musical instructional material, social emotional learning graduate reimbursement PD and supplies, and an increase of reimbursement for professional development conferences and courses. This would provide proper and updated materials in science and music for both teachers and students. Also, current allocation for course reimbursement does not cover the needs and requests of teachers in order for us to stay current in content and pedagogy. This includes social emotional learning, which is needed to meet students' needs, technology, speakers for all classrooms with projectors, and extra projectors and Chromebooks and hardware for when devices break. In salary, appropriate contingencies for all staff wages, an increase in salaries to make it comparable to surrounding communities. This is needed to attract more and better qualified TAs and substitute teachers. It is also needed to attract and retain all teachers and administrators. The AEA FY19 Arlington High School budget request. Additional staffing, 0.8 FTE English, 1.2 FTE Social Studies, 0.6 Visual Arts, which has not seen an increase in FTE for several years, 0.2 Performing Arts, 0.4 Facts, 1.0 Guidance, 0.2 Math, 0.6 Physical Education, 0.2 ELL, 0.4 for Science Lab classes, which is seeing growth, 0.2 for Science B co-taught for biology, and 0.2 for Science B co-taught chemistry, and an additional 1.2 FTE for world languages due to growth in Italian, Mandarin, and Spanish. As we know, when student enrollment increases, so does class sizes, and also not only are these additional FTEs necessary to keep class sizes down, but also to offer enough courses for students. Like Dr. Janger mentioned earlier, teachers would like the 0.6 dean position to increase to 1.0. While teachers were happy when a 0.6 dean was budgeted for this school year, the AEA believes this was not enough and the position needs to be full-time. Even with 2.6 deans, they are often preoccupied by other pressing issues when needed by a teacher, especially when there are only 2 working at the time. Addison has 3 full-time assistant principals. It is now time for the high school to also have 3 full-time deans. For technology, same request as Addison, but also an increase in the number of Chromebooks available to students. This will allow teachers to continue to enhance their curriculum as more students would have access to technology. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jason. Any questions at all for the? All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you again.
Okay. Now we're on to the monthly financial report. We're ahead of schedule by 10 minutes. No?
I had a question, not, yeah.
Oh, wait a minute, we got a question.
No, not of you, it's of Dr. Bodie. When or will we hear requests from the special education department about funding needs for next year?
There are no requests specifically. I'll let Ms. Elmer talk to this. Well, there are certainly requests. There are Mr. Denizio.
You've heard the requests from the different levels, and so Mr. Denizio and I are going through right now, looking at individual line items, and as they present their priorities and we go through our prioritization process as a district, you know, special ed will be supporting the different asks at different levels.
There are a number of mandated expenses that we know, that we anticipate for next year. There have been requests that relate to special education in both the middle and the high school. For example, in the high school, the co-taught. In a co-taught class, you have someone that is a special education teacher as well as a content teacher. So you're not seeing a request this year for more special education liaisons, so that is actually part of the principals, but it's not specifically being made by the special education department per se. It's intermingled this year with the different level reports.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions at all? Okay. Now we move on to the monthly financial report. John.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone, for coming.
Thank you.
Good morning.
So November's monthly report is in front of you. There hasn't been much change in anything. Even the words are very similar. The date and the dollars changed. But the bottom line is that in the general fund operating budget, the unencumbered balance is about $100,000 less than last year. So it went down
last month.
200 over the last month. Sorry, it went down 200 from the first to the second report, 100 from the second to the third report. And like I said before, this time of year, that's not a big deal because the methodology we're using is just sort of identifying what our unspent number is, and not trying to project where we're going to land until we get further into the year. We can have a better shot and do a better job at projecting that. Our same watch list is the same still each month. Every month we get further along is better. That if we do have something crop up, it will be less because there's just less time in the year. No changes in the grants or the revolving accounts as far as projected revenues or expenses. They're being spent as planned, and no changes since the last report in that area. And the combined report, the only change is the bottom line. The one thing that is a little different in the revolving account is at the last meeting, you may remember that the instrumental music revolving account showed a deficit because we were pulling in a high school and elementary school, but we really only budget for the elementary school. So it was showing the revenue for one, but the expense for both. So it looked like there was a big deficit, but we talked about we would take that out and only include the elementary. So, like I said, there hasn't been a lot of changes in the month. We're still projecting on target. We still keep a close eye on our watch list for special ed out of districts, but there's not a lot keeping us up at night right now, except for FY19.
Bill.
Let me begin by saying, if you've already answered this, I apologize. My only excuse is I'm old and forgetful. Under computer supplies, it's showing a substantial deficit. If that's already been responded to.
No, we did talk about it a while back, but
okay.
we haven't finalized our work. I've been working with Dave Good. He was out for a little bit, so he's just back, getting his feet wet. Once he does, we'll nail that down. I think some of it is going to be that some of it was charged there, belongs somewhere else, but there will be a deficit there, but nailing down the exact number we haven't done yet.
So if it results in it belongs somewhere else, hopefully those things will be resolved and we won't be hearing that as a response in the future.
Correct.
Okay, and my only concern is that previous years we've had a chunk in here, and the issue was for testing and things, but we know what we're doing testing right now, so we should have budgeted. Thank you.
Jersey.
I have a question, not so much for anything specifically here, but just about how the system works. So when we're doing the encumbrances, I'm wondering, how do we change those if there's a mid-year correction? Say we hire a new staff member or we let go of a staff member. What happens to, do we throw in the encumbrance for the rest of the year for the new one? Do we take it out, or does it just float until the end of the year and then you fix it all at the end?
So it could be two ways. The first would be, because we encumber payroll now, the mechanics are that when the old person becomes inactive, their encumbrance goes away. It's
Okay,
no
so
longer in the
it's
encumbered
wiped
column.
out, okay.
And until the new person becomes active, they're not encumbered. So if there's a time period where that's happening, we would put it in the projected encumbrance column
down.
because it's out of one.
Okay.
Then when they become active and their money is encumbered, they go back into the encumbered column, and then there may be a difference that would show up in the available budget as a positive or a negative.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, on the METCO, we're reporting, we're reporting revenue, projected revenue of 440,000, but actual 44,000, which shows as a $396,000 deficit. We've got actual and encumbrances for the expenses, but I suspect that there are additional state payments we haven't received yet, which aren't showing up.
Right, so we talked about maybe, we by the business office, I mean, we talked about maybe making the encumbrance or adding a projected encumbrance and just putting the rest of the grant in there, because we do expect that we're gonna get the whole grant, we just we've only requested a certain amount, or only one payment has been booked as revenue so far. So if that's a little bit misleading, we could certainly do that, add it in, either in the encumbrance column, it isn't really an encumbrance.
It'd be a negative
projected.
encumbrance.
Correct,
so-
and it would
so
just
to
make that
speak.
balance.
Yeah, so
revenue
we're
zero.
still anticipating the 440.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
The only grant we anticipate that isn't on here anymore, it's the grant we talked about at the last meeting, that special ed program improvement grant that isn't being offered this year.
Yeah.
The rest are all expected to collect all of the money.
And we've taken care of the expenditures on the SPED grant by placing them elsewhere or eliminating them.
Yes, we're still in the planning to finalize that plan, but that is the plan, yes.
Okay. So no headaches that I have to worry about.
Not in grants revolving, no?
Okay.
Jennifer.
So I'm wondering if it makes sense to add the AEF grants now that they're such a significant support for the school. Does that, I mean, that they should sort of be in our monthly grant report?
We could do that. We basically just took the method of what was in the budget, was
Right.
booked as a revenue and an expense in the budget. That's what we report on, but we can add.
Yeah. I mean, unless there's a reason it doesn't make sense, it just feels like we want to capture what's going on in the district. We have the money that's being spent by the town and the citizens, and then money that's coming from grants, and, that's just part of the picture now.
The only thing it changes is that the report's tied to the $66 million that was approved by the budget. If we
Right.
add these, that will be different, but.
Right. So it may not make sense. It's just a question, actually genuine, if it makes sense.
Okay.
Len.
Thanks. So at what point in the year do you think you will start estimating remaining expenses and cleaning
February.
that up? We're almost halfway through the year now.
I would say right after the halfway, probably for February.
Great, that'd be helpful. And then looking at the all funding sources report, the bottom line there of available budget is much higher, and I was trying without much success to figure out why. So there, two things that jumped out at me were there are some line items here, like the very first one, the custodial overtime, that aren't in the other report. There's a few others, like MTRB pension also, that are carrying large available balances. So maybe it's something you need to take a look at, but I'm kind of confused about what's going on and why there's so much showing there but not anywhere else.
So the all-in report should just be the total of the available budget and for expense for the three reports, but I will take a look and find out if that's not the case.
Okay, well then maybe it's, part of it is that the revolving,
Part of the grant
revolving
don't have
expense and the grants expenses are also
projected encumbrance in there.
So those are, sorry, so those available budget amounts,
So what that
is that
report-
really going to be available amounts, or is that just stuff that's not been booked to those accounts yet?
That's exactly what it is. It's money that just hasn't been spent yet. That's pretty much what all the reports are at this point. It's just what hasn't been committed yet to this point.
Okay. So, I mean, I still think it's not creating the picture that I was hoping to create. You know, I did want to see, you know, all in. Where are we? You know, are we running short? Are we running, do we really have 1.4 million that we don't expect to, you know, to spend? Or, you know, as we're getting further in the year, getting a better handle on that, so that, you know, some of these expenses, some of these funding requests that we've been sitting on can then start getting funded if available. Or like last year, we had to start cutting people back because we didn't have money, we were running short. Right. So that's kind of the information that I'm looking for, and I'm not sure what report will get us there, but this isn't quite getting us there.
So I think it can. It's just going to, like I said in the beginning, just change the methodology of how we want to report and go to sort of trying to guess what the spending's going to be in each line. We can do that.
You know, I don't want to rush. I don't want to rush you into it. It just, you know, in some of the line items, you can see, well, the supplies, we haven't spent all the supplies. We don't know what we're going to spend on supplies for the next 6 months. But some of the items, like the pension number, you know, why is there $100,000 sitting there?
Yep.
You know, that we should know. Is it because we haven't encumbered it yet?
Yep.
Or is it because that's really a surplus?
Yeah, so maybe we would get a lot closer to what you're looking for if we handled the revolving in the grant similar to the operating budget and had the projected encumbrance. But yeah, we haven't encumbered it yet, but we know we're going to spend it, all that, especially.
Maybe that's what's missing in the grant lines. Okay,
so
great.
that might get you a lot closer to what you're looking for.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Len. Any other questions? Okay, thanks, John. Superintendent's report, building projects update and the CPR progress update.
Right. Well, there's really, with respect to building updates, there's really not much more to report than last week, except for one thing. And a more official announcement will be sent out to all of the parents and guardians in the community, as well as the Arlington community at large, that we are going to have a kickoff community forum on Thursday, January 4th from 7 to 9 p.m. in Town Hall. And the purpose of this forum is to, one, for people to be able to come and hear from our owner's project manager and our architects what is the process that we are going to be engaged in during this phase, which is called the feasibility phase, and then some projection forward as to what to expect after that. But the bulk of the time will also be an opportunity for people to be able to work in smaller groups to talk about, you know, issues that they would like to have the building committee to consider as we go through this process. So more information will be available next week. A final vote of the building committee will precede a formal announcement. But I think it's important also this evening to say that, because it would be great if you could save the date. Save the date already went out, but this is an opportunity. It is not going to be the only opportunity through this process for public participation, but it certainly will be the big initial one. With respect to the other buildings, really, there's not much in the way of change. We're moving forward with Gibbs, and we're staying, according to both our architect and our contractor, we are definitely within the timeline, so there's no big changes there.
We had dedication yesterday? I didn't
Yes.
share that.
Okay, we'll talk about that soon. So with respect to Hardy, again, the same thing. Things are moving forward. We still are looking at all of the plans, and certainly part of that is also the playgrounds. We've had an application into CBA, and we also have more discussion that's going on at Capitol with regard to the playground at Hardy. In fact, I think that was on the discussion tonight, perhaps.
Yes.
Yeah. And then, lastly, the very fun thing that happened yesterday, we've been we have finally had a ribbon cutting ceremony at Stratton. This was thought to have happened in October, but because there was some punch list things, and the landscaping wasn't quite ready. We had deferred it to November and then had to reschedule it to now. But the enthusiasm of the school was no less ardent. We had the entire school and faculty and staff in the cafeteria, and there was even extra space because they're all so little, they just scrunched together. But we wanted the ribbon cutting ceremony to be with the students because the school is for our students. What was absolutely heartwarming is that there were 3 speakers for the 5th grade, and there were 3 speakers from the kindergarten, and they had a lot of courage to be in front of especially the little kindergartners. They were just wonderful. In fact, one of the girls was not a bit shy by raising her hand. In elementary school, when you want silence, you raise your hand, and everybody hadn't quite silenced down for her part of it, so she raised her hand to make sure everybody would be quiet. So we had members of the school committee. In fact, Mr. Hayner spoke. We all had very short speeches. We had to have very short speeches because of the timing. And we also had Sean Garbely, who is our state rep, representing the town manager, who couldn't make it at the last minute, was his deputy town manager, Sandy Pooler. We had Alan Reedy, who's head of the Permanent Town Building Committee, and John Cole, who did not speak, but he was there, who had been instrumental through this whole project. Not only just the project of recent, but you have to understand the renovation of Stratton actually began 6 years ago in different phases, and so he was very much part of all that. We had the architect Lee Rich there from DRA speaking, and Joe Curo, who is a select person. He was quite animated about this because this was his home, the school his children went through. So all in all, it was a wonderful event, and I think the kids enjoyed it a lot. Everyone, when I asked them, how many love your school, they all raised their hands. And the students spoke about the library as just being wonderful, among other things. So it was great. It was just wonderful. So that's the building updates at the moment. And I have a few more things, but I thought we would go into these other reports.
You have a question on the building?
Yeah, buildings. We mentioned Hardy Playground. What can we do about the Pierce?
Well, we will look specifically at that. As you know, Capital actually a year ago has committed to a review of all the playgrounds in the town, and the person who's overseeing that is the director of Park and Recs, John Marshall. I'm going to have a conversation with him about the playground, and first of all, see how much in the way of funds are available and what can be done as we move forward. The thing about any kind of major capital expense on this, it has to go through the capital planning, though you may have some more updates.
Right. So the plan isn't finalized, but it's on the, there's, for FY19, there's $20,000 to design the playground up here, and in 20, there's $300,000 to put the playground in. Then that's followed by Bishop, but the Bishop piece is actually on the rec department's asks because something about the land. Might not be under our jurisdiction.
Yeah. In the interim, we can fix some of the safety issues that we have here.
Yeah, I was just going to ask that. That should be priority right now.
Yeah.
We'll look at that. We'll definitely take a look at that.
You know, the photographs that the parents sent really illustrate an urgent need.
Yeah, the retaining wall is something I really hadn't heard about before tonight, so.
If we have children that are being injured right now, something we need to look into. If it's, and I'm not knocking anybody, it's lack of supervision, that's one thing. But if it's actually the property itself, like there were a couple items down at Hardy a couple of years ago, as soon as you recognized it, you fixed it right away, and I'm very appreciative of that.
We'll certainly look into safety issues, but I also do want to say that playground injuries occur in all of our schools. They do.
If it's something we can remediate.
I'm not dismissing that that's an issue, but we definitely will look into it. If there's some fix that we can make soon, we'll do that.
Great. Thank you, Paul.
Okay, so we're going to Rod go up first.
Good evening. So this is the CPR program review update. Earlier this year, I made a presentation that was that informed the community about the findings from last year's CPR report in the area of civil rights. So this is the update to what the various things that have been done in order to address the findings from DESE. So the first one, I'm not going to go into the only thing I'm going to do is do a summary of the various corrective action plans that were submitted to DESE, and then what has been done in order to address those. So on the first one, this is has to do with our handbooks being translated into the 3 main languages, which is Chinese, Japanese, and Spanish, and that we are to place hot links on the web page where parents and community members can go and click on in order to see the translations. I have the links, I put the links onto the slides, so if we could, are we able to click on them? So they're live.
I think it's because it's mirroring your screen is the issue.
Oh, that's not gonna work.
Because it's on the mirroring setting, so I think that's why you're not getting a live link.
Can we go to the
Can we go to the actual
Arlington Public School website directly?
website? In the interim, I placed the 2 links on there so that if you were to click on, if you go straight to the Arlington main web page, what we did was, and I just want to, before I go forward, I want to just thank Claudia Bertelli. She works with us in order to manage the web page, and she's a big reason why a lot of these actions have taken place. She's gone over and beyond the call of duty to work with me after hours, you know, at 5 o'clock, times when she wasn't feeling well, so I just want to just make sure that I acknowledge her properly. But if you go to the Arlington web page, on the left-hand side, you have the hot links, the quick links. And so at the bottom, and it's by alphabetized, you'll see the word translations. If you click on translations, it will take you to a translations page. On that page, you know, parents who need various documents translated into their home languages are able to, you know, look through that page, click on request forms. You're able to, there's various documents that we've identified that they can immediately download into their home language. And then there's also an area where if they would like to translate the different web pages into their home language, you can go to Google Translate and do that, and they can select their language, click on it, and then all the documents, all the wording, all the text on the page will be translated into their home language. Okay.
Go ahead, yep.
Right now, all of the major documents are already translated.
They're already on there.
They're already there. That you don't have to go through Google Translator. They're
Right.
there right now in the 3 languages that we've
Yes.
been asked to put them in.
Right.
Chinese, Japanese, Spanish.
Chinese, Japanese,
Spanish.
and Spanish have identified our 3 main languages for Arlington.
That's right.
However, if I speak another language, I can also go to Google Translate and then translate those documents into that language as well. You have a question?
Well, I was playing with it on my computer, and it's also helpful for the people who even speak Japanese or Spanish because it gives the title translated.
Yes.
So, because right now the titles are in English with the language appended, I mean the name of that language, but if you go to the Google Translate site, the title is translated into the language so they can say, oh, this is the one I want.
Absolutely.
Right. Oh, so I just have a question. If
Jennifer, go.
That's the main Arlington
That's
Public
the
Schools
homepage.
homepage.
Well, this is the handbook. This is like the
So I just have a question. If a parent needs an interpreter in another language, so it seems to indicate that the only possibilities are Chinese, Japanese, and Spanish. Is that true, or is there
That's an excellent question. So if you scroll down to the bottom of the page, the section, there's a request form that parents can click on, and then they can fill that request form out. The request form has also been translated into Chinese, Japanese, and Spanish.
Right.
So if you need an interpreter or you need another document that's not one of the main documents, we have, I believe, 76 documents on there that are translated into the main language. But if you speak another language other than those 3 main languages, you can click on that, that request form, fill it out.
How would you click on it? I mean, you wouldn't click on a Chinese, Japanese, or Spanish one, right?
No,
So,
if you scroll down to the.
But if you're doing Google Translate and you've already translated it, is that the idea?
Well, no,
Okay.
if you could go to Google Translator.
Yeah.
And then that form will be translated into their home language.
Okay, so then that request can be made?
Yes.
Okay, because it looks like you could only make the request. If
Right.
I'm just looking at the English, you know,
Right.
you can only make the request in these 3 languages.
Right, and the requirement from DESE was for us to translate the documents into our 3 main languages, but we also made, we also wanted to make it available to parents if they speak another language, to make sure that if they can go to the Google Translator page, that they can take that document and translate it into an alternative language other than
Right.
Japanese, Chinese, and Spanish.
Okay.
Rod, do you want to, I mean, don't worry about, let's not worry about this. Let's, all right, let's.
We can go,
just,
yeah.
We'll
just go to the next slide.
We can put this this PowerPoint on the website too.
Let's do that. One question I have about translate, do you have a record? Do you get a lot of like requests for other languages in those 3, like translators for Arabic or any other language, or?
Well, that's a very good question. Now that we have a formalized process in place, we also identified Heather Smith, who's our family language, our family liaison for ELL families, so that we can utilize her. So once the document has been translated, it's submitted into Heather, and then she will be able to keep track of what languages have been requested. And we can keep track of interpreters, you know, different documents, and then if we see that there's another need to have documents translated into another language, then we can add that document to the documents that have already been translated into the 3 main languages.
But I mean, the other thing is, do you get any requests for parents who want to have an interpreter at an IEP meeting or anything like that?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like when they click on that request form, it's sent into Heather, and then we can track it by looking at the requests that are sent into Heather.
And separately for special ed, when we're inviting them to a meeting, we typically already know if it's a family whose home language is not English, and so that's set up through our department separately for special ed related meetings. This is a newer process for just meeting with the principal or getting other school-based
So then you
documents.
call an interpretation service and they provide it.
Right. This is also for like parent-teacher conferences. They can fill out the request form and ask for an interpreter.
Okay.
Sorry.
Very good. Okay.
Just to beat a dead horse, sorry. So when I tried to translate it to like Italian, which I know a teeny bit about, it still looks like the request form can only be for Chinese, Japanese, and Spanish. So there might want to be an other section in there.
I wish, well,
So
let
I'm
me get through my
online.
report, and if we can, if
It
I
says
could.
translate and interpreted request form, and then there's 3 options, but there's no sort of extra other. So it's sort of, it just feels like a parent may not know that option's there, because it explicitly looks like it's not. That there's an option for a.
It is there. I could show you in the middle of the page. There's I wish I could click, but there's it says forms.
I'm looking at document translation and interpreter requests.
That's at the bottom of the page.
Yeah,
But if you click
right.
on, if you go to the middle of the page,
Yeah.
there's a link that it says parent forms.
Yep.
You click on parent forms.
Yep.
Then if you scroll up to the top.
Oh, so I'm just wondering how somebody would make that request for, say, an interpreter, but in a different language.
If you go to the top of the page,
Yep.
and you could click on Google Translate, and then if you hit the other language, everything on the page is translated into that other language, and then at the bottom, you'll
Right.
see the form for the request form, and then they can click on that, and then it will be in their language.
Okay, but they can't make an interpreter request. That's what it seems pretty clear, that there's no option to ask for an interpreter.
There is.
Yeah, it works. If
Okay.
you look at the one that's in English here,
Yep.
it doesn't have any specific language.
No, they all, yeah. Which one
No,
has no
I mean,
language?
it says translator and interpreter request form.
Right.
It doesn't have dash Japanese or Chinese or anything, just says
does?
that. No, there's one that says translation and interpreter request form.
All right, we should.
Okay, anyway, all right, anyway.
We're
the
down
only
into
one-
the,
I
we're
can
down
show
in the
you.
nitty
All right, I'm
gritty.
sorry.
think we got it.
All right,
I think it was a
all right.
good-
I don't see it, but okay, that's
All
fine.
right.
I'm
No,
asking
I
a
can work, I
simple
can, I
Don't see
can,
anything.
I can
Okay.
work with you to
All right.
show it after the meeting. I can
Okay.
show you, or at another time, I can walk you through the homepage.
Okay.
Okay?
All right, let's keep going. The next thing is handbooks, right? Code of conduct.
So the next one is the handbooks. So links have been created for the updated handbooks, and if you, again, if you go to the, this one is under families, so if you go to the tab families and scroll down, it's school handbooks. And if you click on it, the handbooks have been updated. So they're still in the same place, they've just been updated to include specific language that Desi asked us to include around the discipline code. So you'd have to look inside of there, but there weren't a lot of changes made to the handbooks around our non-discrimination policy to make sure we included all the protective classes. And so if you look on that, on the elementary, middle, and high school handbooks, they've been updated to include those protective classes around harassment and our anti-discrimination policy. So nothing's really changed with the placement of the handbooks. The language has been updated. We sent it out to our attorney, we got it back, we updated, and then we just updated the handbooks and placed them in the same place as it is under the Families tab. Okay? Our bullying intervention and prevention plan, we had to update it to include language that made it a requirement for those staff members that are hired after the beginning of the year that they would participate in training. And a module has been placed in Google Classroom that they can access. And then there's a way to tell, you know, how many people have taken, there's a way to track to make sure that they've taken the online module. So they will be trained in the bullying and the intervention and prevention plan and be updated with the policies for the district. For our student discipline, again, there's more updates within the handbooks to pretty much the language around around disciplinary action that's taken for students. And then we also had an annual discipline report that you received from Marilyn Salvis on December 7th. And then we're working to create monthly reports that can be sent out to principals to update them on the discipline that's taking place in their schools. And then we'll also talk to them about sharing that with staff so they can track discipline and how it's impacting, and whether or not it's impacting various subgroups of students. CR 12A, again, around the non-discrimination. What we had to do was make sure that the email addresses and the phone numbers and the contact information was provided for all of the 504 coordinators within the district and added to the homepage, and also to identify our Title IX liaison, who was our athletic director. And so that was just basically added to the page, if you to the home page. And so now so basically every principal is a 504 coordinator for the school. So we had to just add the email addresses so you can click on it, and if you wanted to get in contact with them, that we facilitated a way to contact them. Okay. This CR16 has to do with the letter that is sent to students who may not have graduated. They left school and they did not graduate, so we had to send out a letter. We have to make sure that we're sending letters to not only students that have just graduated, but former students, and to track to see whether or not they have applied to an alternative program in order to earn their diploma or enter into an adult education class. So that letter provides them with specific places where they can go and continue their education, and it also, we put language in there that's going to motivate them to do so. And so we also included a link in that letter that will link them to DESE, where they have a hotline that they can contact in case they move outside of the community, if you're moving to another community, and you can find out where those alternative programs are and adult education classes. So just giving them information how they can continue their education should they leave the high school without acquiring a diploma. This is something that Allison worked on at the beginning of the year, making sure all our staff are aware of our physical restraint policies. And so what we had to do is we had to upload the actual PowerPoint that Allison presented to them, and also upload the sign-in sheets that they had to, where staff signed in when they went to the training. This is our curriculum review, looking at our curriculum materials, resources, to ensure that there's that it's inclusive and it's not containing demeaning material against any particular cultural group. What we've done is we've uploaded rubrics and criteria for analyzing curriculum for any type of implicit bias, and also to make sure that all cultural groups are represented in a positive manner. I'm going to work with the curriculum leaders and department heads in order to continue that. And then there's, by January 24th, we have to submit like dates and a plan of how we're going to put that plan in action. So what I also plan to do is to create a PowerPoint that all curriculum leaders can share with their teachers, principals can share with their teachers, and so they can utilize the rubrics that we put into the PowerPoint to review materials. And so they can at least do it at least annually throughout the year, but this is something that as we look at establishing or buying more curriculum resources, or whenever we have to go through that cycle, that we can utilize this rubric to make sure that we're acquiring material that's inclusive. And then this is our institutional self-evaluation, making sure that all students, regardless of cultural background, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, that they have equal access to a quality education. And so what we have to do is a self-evaluation. So I've created a survey. I'm going to send a survey out to staff. And that will, has various statements on there, and it's a Likert scale where they talk about where it asked them, is this always is this something that we always do? Is this something that we need to think about doing? And so there's various statements on the survey that staff has to respond to, and the frequency of when that takes place, and in order to make sure that we're providing equal access. And then as we get the data back, we can identify various areas, if there are any areas that we need to focus on in order to make sure that we're supporting students properly.
Okay, any questions? Yep.
Just I'd love to see the results of that survey.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
There
great.
are there's different spots or different points in the progress report. So there's going to be more updates as we go throughout the year that I have to upload to DESE to show our progress. Because the ones where there's a plan, for instance, with looking at this one, our self-evaluation, and also looking at curriculum materials, looking for making sure that there's no offensive material, or that it's representing all cultural groups in a positive manner. There's like different spots along the way where you have to share that information with DESE.
The one point I want to make is I'm glad to see that we've taken the action we needed to take around translation and interpretation, because that's the one of all the corrective actions for both SPED and civil rights. That was the most significant for me, because that would mean that there are some parents who might not be able to get access to the district to understand what's going on with their kids' education. So I'm glad that's been corrected. All right.
Jeff?
Yeah.
Question.
When will we know if DESE's happy with our remediations, corrections? Do we have a date?
So we'll get a progress report in January. So there's some more materials that, like the fixing of the language around the letter. There's some things I'm going to upload to DESE by January, so we'll get another progress report at that time.
Thank you.
All right. Yeah.
Speaking also to the translation, are staff made aware of the website and the possibilities for translation and stuff? Because I'm thinking they may be the first people that a new parent contacts, and that's a useful thing for them to be able to point at.
That's an excellent question. I haven't sent anything out to staff as yet, but I can work with Dr. Bodie to construct a memo that we can send out to all staff, letting them know of the changes that have taken place.
Great, thank you.
All right, Allison, thank you.
Right, so just continuing on, for the corrective action plan, Special Ed submitted their progress reports back in November. Those have all been approved, and one of them specifically has been marked corrected. That was the facilities issues where we had to relocate a classroom. There will be another submission. Ours will be due in March, which will entail a record review of subsequent to the corrective action that we implemented, the training and monitoring systems. So we will be doing that again in March. The committee asked at our September meeting for further investigation into why Arlington Public Schools has pervasive non-compliance through several review cycles, citing the 2006 review, 2011, and the most recent review. So we've been reviewing that since we met in September, and identified some themes that came out of those reports. I can't speak to what specifically happened in 2005 or 2006 or 2011 because I wasn't here. However, what we have noted is that staffing has been a theme for us, and specifically some of the findings in this last cycle arose from our inability to have people in the positions at the start of the school year, and that we were in that position. We had offered the positions prior, or we had offered individuals the positions prior to the start of the school year, and we were unable to finalize the hire due to people backing out around the salary package that was offered. And we do know that, as the AEA has noted, that Arlington, compared to some of our surrounding communities, isn't as competitive in our pay as other communities, so we do often have trouble recruiting those highly qualified and certified individuals. Also retaining special ed staff, that's a national trend, that's not unique to Arlington. However, again, competitive salaries seem to be a driver, as well as just those national trends around special education. The rate is higher than it is for general educators, paperwork, hostile parent interactions, fear of litigation. The demands of working with a needier population are often reasons cited for those turnover rates. And our teachers do have higher caseloads than comparable districts in the area. So those are some of the things that we believe are driving some of that staff retention issue. Training is another area that we looked at. Within the department over the last 4 years, our focus of professional development has been around instructional practices, program development, content, in addition to our district-wide initiatives of social emotional learning, cultural proficiency, and curriculum development. We have not had a specific focus on regulatory compliance during those times. So when we look at why don't people know the rules, why don't they know the regulations in order to implement them, our focus of professional development has not been in that area. Again, with the higher turnover of staff and the retention of staff, every time we bring somebody new on board, we have to train them. And so bringing people up to speed on previous trainings and whatnot, those all play into those factors. Leadership was another area in the department. Since 2006 to now, there's been 5 special ed directors, so less than 3 years average tenure in that role. It takes time to develop and create policies, procedures, and implement them. So with that higher rate of turnover, I do think that has probably led to those higher numbers of findings over the last 11 years. And there's been changes in our administrative growth structure, our administrator structure, and there's been growth in that role, and I certainly think that's a good thing. But again, we've gone from having program developers to assistant directors to coordinators, and as we now currently have 6 people in those positions, but we've had over 18 individuals over that period of time holding those various positions. As well as the role of the team chairperson has changed. As we changed the role and we increased the number of administrators, the role of team chairperson, who is largely responsible for compliance in those areas, has also changed just within the last 4 years. We've varied, we've added some team chair roles, but we've had 20 individuals fulfilling those roles either on a part-time or full-time basis. And I think, as I mentioned with the teachers and that, you know, as you have changeover in staff, the need to train and to get people up to speed and the consistency that offers could also be a factor. So in reviewing those themes, it would seem a focus on compliance training and retention of highly qualified and trained staff should be a priority of our department and the district. I do think this, you know, we still need to work on program development. We need to be working on content and pedagogy. You know, we can't have our focus only be on paperwork. So I think we're going to have to balance those initiatives. And as I mentioned, I didn't mention out loud, but in the report, one of our corrective actions is to complete an independent program evaluation. And so we're looking forward to their findings as well to complement this as we develop a plan of action.
Good questions. Bill?
Well, I guess this goes to the superintendent. In what you bring forward to us for budgetary requests and things, will you be requesting the staffing necessary and with the appropriate salaries to meet this going forward? In other words, developing in the budget those things that are necessary to, the major thing I'm hearing is that staffing, and staffing based on retention, which requires a salary. And the people that I know in SPED usually have a good history. They have a background. They come to us with several years' experience with multiple degrees and things of that nature, which would put them at a certain point. If in order for us to go forward and not be in lack of compliance in the future, we have to negotiate with the teachers and stuff, a separate side codicil or something to the contract for special needs teachers and something like that. All my rhetoric, I apologize. Can we expect from you some sort of request on the budget to meet these needs?
For additional salaries for our current teachers?
Additional staffing and money enough to staff these people at appropriate salaries.
The issue of salary is an issue of negotiation. The special education teachers are members of the AEA. They are on the salary scale just like all other teachers. It is true that when we hire people that are in special areas, they may come in with a lot more experience, and therefore would be higher on the scale. We don't have a separate salary structure for special education teachers.
I understand that, but you as a superintendent under the law have a prerogative to bring people in within that salary spot. I guess my question is, will you be requesting sufficient additional staff? Because one of the things in here was workload, and Allison mentioned that the workload, the teachers have asked for it, the principals have asked for it, more guidance, more staff to deal with the heavy workload in this area. But we can also bring people in at a higher salary. I'm asking you, will you be bringing a budget to us?
I'm not bringing a budget to you that's going to change the salaries of our current teachers. No.
I'm not asking that. I'm asking a budget reflecting the need for additional staff in special education.
You've heard the reports of from each level, and the high school specifically is asking for additional staffing for their co-taught classes.
I understand that. Is the request that came forward from the elementary and the secondary people, will that meet the needs that are recommended to support or to deal with the issues that we have for lack of staffing in this report?
We will be bringing forward what the administrators feel is adequate staffing to the extent that we are able to within the constraints of our budget. The other thing that I think you should take away from what Ms. Elmer was saying is that this is a field that's very compliance driven. And you heard when the report was given in the fall, how very detailed those requirements are. Our focus is we want people who are special education teachers to be very good teachers and to be provided with the professional development that's necessary for that.
But the other districts, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
That is, in fact, that was an issue that was identified years ago that we needed, if we were going to have more inclusivity, more co-taught, that we needed to provide the professional development that was necessary for that. We have a limit in terms of, first of all, the amount of professional development time that is available, for one, even though we do bring people out during the school day for embedded professional development. This is what is being said here, honestly, is no different than every other district. We have the focus of this CPR is really on compliance to the nitty-gritty regulations. It is no reflection on the quality of teaching that's going on in our district.
My understanding of I've got to follow with Jeff. My understanding of the motion was to find out what was different from us than the other districts because we had so many non-compliances. I'm hearing this report saying it's staffing, it's professional development. These both cost money. And I guess in order to get there, we have to invest that money for more staffing and providing more money for professional development.
Okay, thank you, Bill.
Okay. Okay, so first I wanted to thank you. I found the root causes part of the report really helpful, and in thinking about what we need, how we need to be changing the shape of the budget in the coming year. Because of your reference in your report, I looked up the radar benchmarking study, and I think that's really interesting, where our staffing for FTEs for special education per 100 students with disabilities, this is for 2017, which I suspect may be a dip. So I don't know how it's changed over time, but for Arlington, it was 3.2. The state average is 5.3. Our comparable districts, the lowest of them is 4.4. The highest is 8.2. So our staffing is just way out. And that's part of why I was asking if we're going to be hearing a specific request about special education, because I felt with what I saw in the root causes and then these numbers, it looks like we have a big readjustment we need to be thinking about. Now, what I don't know is things like co-taught teachers and how exactly everybody, is everyone truly captured in this? I'm not sure. So,
yeah.
So I
that's
think
new. The state has offered that rate. This year was the first year the state has offered that radar tool. I think, to respond to your questions about the budget request, each department has come forward and we're asking people to make really tough decisions, and we know that there's a very limited amount of money. So as a district, we're going to be meeting to prioritize those things. Obviously, I would love to see, all of those requests met, especially in the special ed department. I think it's going to be upon, us through Dr. Bodie's proposal to the school committee for the budget, and for you all when you put forth, your budget to the town to, think about the priorities we have placed. I know that none of us are going to get everything we're asking for. That's why John and I are trying to be really thoughtful, going line by line. We need to look at professional development, and this year the state didn't give us a grant that they've been giving us for the last 8 years at least, that I've been in this role. They've been giving us that grant. We didn't get it this year. I don't have high hopes that we'll be getting that last year, so that's going to have to go into the operating budget where it wasn't previously, and that's to the tune of between $40,000 and $50,000 historically. So, those are the kind of decisions we're going to have to make, and I know they're going to be tough for everybody, and I'm sure the general educators and each of the level principals feel that the priorities they have placed in front of us are equally important. So I know everyone's going to be making tough decisions.
Yeah. Thank you. Glenn?
Yes, thank you. I also want to thank you for putting together the report. It is very helpful. I'm glad that you took a serious look at what are some of the possibilities, at least, for some of the root causes of the issues we're having. I'm a little disappointed, Dr. Bodie, that you're still stating that we're no different from other districts. We had a much worse performance on the CPR than on any other district. So I don't understand why you won't still admit that. We're different. Maybe we're great at classroom teachers, but from a compliance perspective, we're not up there. So I'm glad we've looked into it, and going forward, with the outside evaluation, maybe that'll give us some more information. I still think there's sort of two detailed pieces that I would request more information on as we go forward, particularly putting together the budget. One is the notion of turnover. Rob, if you can possibly talk with your peers and get some data, is our turnover really much worse than other districts, or is it the same? I think that's an important piece that we're missing. Maybe it is. Maybe we are just the same. Turnover's high everywhere, I know that. Are we higher than everybody else, or are we the same? If we are higher, then probably it's the salary issue, and that's something we'll have to look to address. If it's around the same, then that's just turnover that everybody has to deal with. The second issue is caseload, and I know there was some requests for team chairs, but we don't really have a sense of is our team, and they're the ones that are tasked most heavily with the compliance issue. Do we have an issue? I know we have an issue with turnover. Do we have an issue with caseload with team chairs? Are our team chairs do they have a higher caseload than other towns? That's a piece of data we should be able to get, and that will help drive our decision for budgeting purposes. So thank you again for the report, and I hope we can get some of that additional information.
All right, thank you, everyone.
I am not denying that we had some findings on compliance. I will also want to point out how this has continuously improved over the years. The issue that's the same is the issue of attracting people into the profession of special education. People who are attracted to it come into the profession wanting to do good and to be able to work with students and help them reach their highest potential. What I think is a surprise to a lot of special education teachers coming into the field today as compared to even 10 years ago is the amount of paperwork that is required and the level of, it is nationwide and in particular in Massachusetts becoming an issue in terms of retaining people in this field. And it is, there are certainly, we all want to see our students with various disabilities be provided with every opportunity they can to learn and grow to their highest potential. But I think, honestly, in the world of compliance, I think we've gone a little bit over the edge on some of this stuff. And our focus has been to provide excellent education, excellent teaching, and certainly the evidence that's out there today says that the more students are able to access the curriculum in a general ed setting, they are going to do better. And so we've had a push in that direction. And I'll say.
All right, consent agenda.
Mr. Chairman,
yeah.
I just want to make the comment as a central office administrator who's in a district that's currently going through a coordinated program review. There's such opportunity to find misplaced semicolons. Mr. Chairman, you are absolutely correct in stating that the issue of translations was a barrier and was something important for us to take note of.
Right.
And I share with you you're grateful that this is fixed and this is an important thing for us. But we have to maintain a focus on teaching and learning. We need to maintain a focus on what's right for kids. And if we focus on kids and doing the right thing for kids, we are doing our jobs and the results will speak for themselves. I do not want to distract so that we are so focused on semicolons that we're not doing the right thing for kids. Most of the items in these reports, most of these findings did not have a substantive impact on teaching and learning. I want to make sure our kids are learning well. I want to make sure our second language kids are well served. I want to make sure those families are welcomed and understand what's going on. I want us to be focused on doing the right thing rather than spending hours and hours on compliance issues. Thank you for the report. Let's focus on children.
All right.
Excuse me.
Consent agenda.
Excuse me for 1 second. The only thing that I brought to, I agree 100%, the issues of compliance on the nitty-gritty, on the semicolons and things of that nature, and everything that Dr. Bodie said regarding that, I agree with 100%. But the major issue that was brought out and in the compliance did affect teaching, and that was the ratio between staff and students. Thank you.
All items listed with an asterisk are considered to be routine and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a member of the committee so requests, in which event the item will be considered in its normal sequence.
I'd like the job description taken out and moved down.
I gotta read them all. Calm down. Approval of minutes, school committee regular meeting, December 7th, 2017. Approval of warrant number 18119, dated 12/7/2017, total amount $636,948.55. Approval of trip, none. Approval of job description, Director of Instructional Technology.
I'd like that moved down into the section where it says job descriptions, approval of job descriptions.
You want that taken out?
Just taken right out.
Okay. So we're going to remove approval of job descriptions from the consent agenda motion. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
A motion by Dr. Kersey Allison Ampe, second by Cindy Starks. Dr. Starks, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? It carries unanimously. Okay, the instructional technology job description, you want to talk about it now?
No, it's down, we have a section below approval of trip. It says approval of job description, and then it has it repeated again. At least on my original one. Maybe it got taken out.
Oh, it's just a typo that you're objecting to?
No.
All right, then it didn't. I'll talk about it now if you want. I have a question. Under the job description, is this person going to be responsible for hardware and software?
So not specifically. They'd be working with the IT department and our chief technology officer.
Are they going to be working directly with the teachers?
Yes.
So
I mean, they will have a voice in what hardware and software we need to support instructional technology in the district.
Will they be purchasing it? I guess, is this person like a department head for technology throughout the district? Instructional technology. The definitions that I've found on it dealt with software and hardware and the latest thing that's going on out there and sharing with teachers and communication with staff and things of this nature. So I guess
Right. As we move into personalized education more and more, one of the tools is technology. It is not the only tool, and you can have personalized learning without technology, but the fact is blended learning does require that. And as we move forward, and we have something like, how many devices altogether? We're talking, with thousands of devices and the support for teachers. You can have all the hardware in the world, but you also have to be able to support teachers in using them for good educational reasons.
I guess what I'm saying is everything going to flow through this person as far as it's a teaching tool. There's hardware, there's software and stuff. Are they going to be responsible for the district-wide element of this thing, or are they just going to be?
You can say.
So this person is going to work with me. So if there's for instance, I'll give you an example. So if we're looking for an online assessment tool, I will consult with this person. We'll look at vendors along with David Good to make sure that the technology that we purchase is efficient, it's affordable. We'll look at pricing, and that it's also useful in giving us the correct information. And so this person is going to help me make those decisions from the technical aspect, and then it also can help provide professional development for teachers for using the online assessment. So that's just a one example of something and that they'll also evaluate the other technology specialists at the high school level and the middle school level. So they have evaluation responsibility.
That evaluation responsibility won't go into effect this. It will be, in the future.
I did not see enough things in that job description to equate to an administrative position under the AAA. That's where I was coming from. You've clarified it. I'd just like to see a little bit more in that job description.
Okay.
More
I have
than
no problem.
manage, supervise, and evaluate instructional technology, teachers, and support personnel?
Correct.
Right, but the hardware and the software is an element. I'm happy. You've answered my question. Thank you.
All right, Len?
So is this a new position, and when are we hoping to fill it?
This position will be advertised internally, probably only. It is pretty close to budget neutral because the person who fills that role in a real way does a lot of work in the summertime, which is a key time for professional development and a lot of the other work. So it's really taking what is actually happening and giving it the kind of authority that it needs as we move forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think going forward, I would like to see more of a, a plan. What is this instructional technology department going to look like? There's currently somebody at the high school, somebody at the middle school, somebody who represents some elementary school. I don't really know. So I'd like to sort of see what, I keep telling you I'd like to see plans. Where are we going with instructional technology and how we're going to support it? Other districts have a whole department, with lots of staff. Maybe that's not our model. Maybe we have a head teacher who does that at each school. But what is the model going forward? I'd like to see. Thanks.
Yes, you're absolutely correct. In other districts, they have an instructional specialist in every school. We are far short for that. We have right now, in the elementary level, we have 2. So we don't really have a big department. And how we are able to move forward with this is we have stipend teachers at each school that take on that role of technology leadership. But that's totally consistent with what we've been trying to do over the years, is having more teacher leadership in our schools. So, but they need coordination, they need support, and what we're doing is we're in this job description, we're actually saying, let's acknowledge what's actually going on with the person that's doing it. In time, hopefully we will be able to have more, because as the use of technology grows, clearly we need more support than we have from real people who are trained in it specifically.
So we're getting a little far afield. We're just here
I know.
to prove a job description. Right? That's it. Go ahead.
So is this a new position?
It is a new position, but if this is an internal search, the position that currently holds will dissolve. So it's budget.
Why would we
budget
not
neutral.
go outside as well as inside? Why would we not post it both places in hopes of finding the best person for the job?
We feel we have the best person.
Okay, I won't vote for this until I get some kind of tree diagram that shows me where this person fits in and who might work for them and how this is all going to work. Because I agree, you can't just, a new position without any thought as to how we're going to make this whole thing work it doesn't work for me. So.
She just said it.
So what you're essentially saying is we're taking a person who's in a position which isn't as useful to the district as it was when it was creative, adjusting it, maybe upgrading or adjusting it to align with the needs of the district.
Correct.
So that the person who's doing the job is now in a position that aligns more with the needs of the district. So I understand why you'd want to do that. I also understand why you wouldn't want to post externally for a position that's being recrafted to adjust the responsibilities of the incumbent. If we have a high-quality incumbent where the technology is required, a different set of skills and a different set of outcomes, recrafting the position to align to today's needs makes a lot of sense, and I wouldn't want to see us do a recrafting that results in a quality employee for the district being thrown out of work. So I understand my colleagues' interest in in thinking about this, but I sort of see where we're going, and I think it's a good idea.
So here's the thing, we don't meet again for 4 weeks, so that's January 11th. And you want to post this and get this, you want to...
If you approve it, I post it tomorrow. So and I have discussed this with both union presidents, the AAA and AAA, about what would happen with the position. I think one thing that is unknown, but I think that having this person in an administrative position would help sort of craft the direction we're going with instructional technology in the district, and whether we need more than stipending teachers in the elementary schools and we need to put more instructional technology specialists. That would be a future year, if that's the case, that would be a future year budget ask. To add more if that rises to a level of a priority of the district. So it doesn't preclude coming back. So what we're really doing is taking an instructional technology specialist right now who has been doing a lot of this work just by the nature of the skills and experience that this person has, and giving that, as the superintendent said, the authority that we think it needs to make it an administrator position that will then lead toward future growth in instructional technology as we continue to grow. So,
I mean, we can slow this whole thing down if you want, but we could separate it too, right? We can allow the district to go ahead, post this position, get the person hired, not impede teaching and learning in this area, and have a separate motion to answer the questions that have been raised by the members of the committee. We could do that. Yeah?
My concern is that, first off, whatever he or she is doing right now, you can post-date this if we come to a pass on this thing. My perspective is this is giving a raise in the middle of a contract, with or without the approval of the, if we're changing this position, if we're recognizing this position, and there's no change in salary or anything, you have the prerogative to do that. You can change a job description right within it. But if it's a matter of changing somebody from one position, non-union into union, or changing from one unit to another unit and things of that nature, that requires our vote. And that also opens it up to a salary increase going down the line, even if it is quasi-neutral at this point. If somebody's doing something right now and they're being stipend for it, fine. If they're not, I'm just concerned the way this is being done, and the idea of already identifying somebody ahead of time and going through the formality of posting and already identifying this person really bothers me.
Well, I would sort of counter that with one of the things that we hear sometimes is giving teachers opportunities for growth, in professional growth, and allowing, recognizing talent that we have here in the district and what they can do for us, and giving them opportunities to advance in their career. And when someone does that and gets professional licensure that will allow them to do that, I think we would lose out if we don't recognize that.
I have trouble crafting a job description around a position for a person.
Yeah, we are at the point in our evolution as a district that we need one person to, as we do with math or we do with any of our disciplines, that is going to be able to plan very strategically about the work that we're doing in instructional technology, which has a strong component of personalization. And we certainly have an increasingly strong push at all levels, but particularly at the high school, about blended learning. Right now, we have different people in instructional positions, but we do not have one person that's sort of, looking at to where, plotting and being strategic about where we're going to be going as a district. As we have with the more of the hardware end of things, we've needed to expand those positions to deal with the ever-increasing number of devices that we have in our networks. In fact, that's what's happening right now at the town level. We're adding positions for that. The reality of education today is an increasing use of technology, and we have no one in the role that has that sort of that overview of the entire district, K to 12, around instructional technology. We don't. We have stipended positions. We have a couple of people, one person at the high school, one person at the Addison. So this is something that is part of the evolution of the work we've been doing. And I think, to Mr. Spiegel's point, we have people who have been planning for taking on a greater role, and we feel as though this is separate and apart from who the person is. This is what we need right now, and if we were to advertise this outside the district, then we don't have in the budget 2 positions. We have in the budget 1 position. I mean, in terms of money, forget about the name on the money. It's about the amount of money. So we're either going to have to then, if we hired outside, have to lay off one of the people that we currently have. I mean, that's the issue.
Cindy, go ahead, and then I will.
So I would vote for this if we also got, at some point in January, a diagram of who they report to and how they fit in and how they're going to work with the other people who are already there. Like, I want to understand how this person is going to fit in. That's all, because I feel like we just...
Okay, so go ahead.
Okay. I will vote for this. I think Paul put it very eloquently why it makes sense. I also understand my colleagues' distaste because it does feel kind of like a backdoor into a whole creation. This should have presented, this is like a new initiative. We should have talked about it as a new initiative. I would also vote for a request for the administration to provide us with a tree.
Okay, so why don't we do 2 things? Why don't we take a vote? Len, go ahead. What?
Yeah, just one more comment.
All right.
So, yeah, I do take issue that by voting no, we're impeding teaching and learning. I mean, we're not doing that. We're just, at least I am, saying that, this should be a plan. Like last year, we decided we needed a director of guidance and emotional learning, and it was thoughtful. It was put in the budget. It was a plan. It was well thought out. We knew what that person was going to do, what her role was going to be, and that's how you create a department. You don't, in the middle of the year in a consent agenda, slip in a new position. So that's why I will likely vote against it. Thank you.
All right. I stand by my comments, so we're clear. We're going to take a vote. This is taking up way too much time. So we're going to take a vote on, first of all, we're going to vote on the job description, and then we're going to take a vote on Cindy's directive to the school district to come up with an organizational, how do you want to word that?
Yeah, I would like to see an organizational chart and understanding of how this person is, who they're going to report to and interact with, and what the vision is for, eventually growing this. I mean, I like that idea, and I like having someone in this position, but I agree with Len's statements, and I was just kind of like thrown for, well, this is a great idea, but we should have planned for it.
So first, we're going to take a motion on the job description.
I'd like to move Cindy's.
We'll do Cindy's first?
First, yes.
All right, but it's got to be, Karen, do you, so I think we're directing, so the motion by Cindy is to direct the superintendent to report back on an organizational plan for the director of instructional technology in terms of who reports to this person, and a strategic.
They report to.
Yeah. And an instructional technology department plan.
Second.
So we have Cindy's motion, we have a second, and we want to have that delivered to us by January 11th, Thursday, January 11th, 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Motion by Cindy, a second by Paul. Any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? That carries unanimously. Okay, next motion is on the job description. A motion on the job description?
So moved.
Second.
Second by Cindy. All those in favor say aye.
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 All opposed?
No.
Okay.
I'm abstaining.
You're abstaining, so.
Let's do a roll call then.
Okay, Len?
No.
Abstain.
Yes.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
Yes, okay, so the motion carries. Okay, we move on.
So I'm abstaining. It's a
4,
personal friend of
2,
mine,
1.
so I just don't feel it.
Very good, thank you. Okay, subcommittee liaison reports and announcements. Budget, Kirstie Allison Ampe.
Budget has nothing to report at this time. We'll schedule a meeting early in January.
Okay, thank you. Community relations, Cindy.
Nothing to report at this time. No future meetings currently planned.
District accountability, curriculum, instruction, and assessment.
We have 2 meetings planned for January.
Facilities, Jennifer.
I have not been able to track down John Marshall yet, but I will step up so that hopefully we'll bring him to a meeting to get a fuller picture of what's going on with playgrounds.
All right, good. School Enrollment Task Force, we don't have any report. We're not
Nope.
doing much. All right, legal service.
Continues to grow. Enrollment continues to
Yes,
grow.
continue to grow. Arlington High
Damn
School-
Time magazine.
Arlington High School Building Committee, we meet next on the 19th at 6 PM. We end at 6:52. because I have to go to a conference, yeah.
Has there been a decision on who's going to represent us on that education?
The only 2 people that have signaled that they want to be on that committee are Jennifer and Bill. The other person eligible hasn't gotten back to us.
No pressure.
So I don't know, I feel like dissed.
Okay.
Talk to my
Okay.
friends and family about my self-esteem after, I didn't get any response from.
You're not getting any either.
Okay, so yes, 2 people said yes. So I mean, we wanted a minimum of 2, so we have 2 with the time. So the deal is you got to commit.
Yeah.
You can't miss any of the meetings.
Calendar.
And they start at 2 o'clock, so if you're a working person who can't get out of work, you can't do it. Okay, Gibbs Committee, Cindy?
Let's see. I don't have anything to report.
All right. Any liaison reports?
Attended the Stratton PTO meeting. It was a good meeting. They're spending money for the school.
Good. Announcements, any announcements? Future agenda items?
Here, wait.
Yeah.
Oh, I asked about this before, but on 1.1 of our district goals, we're supposed to get a report back in September on the vision, broad-based process to be developed to review, understand, and adopt a vision of students as learners and global citizens. We're supposed to get it to be reviewed by the school committee by October 2017. So I just want to know when we're getting that.
Okay. Thank you. So it was the process to develop a broad-based vision.
1.1. So during the year, so we actually have so the goal and then the evidence of success.
Yep.
And there's 2 parts of the evidence of success with dates actually. And I know when we talked about in general setting up our calendar, we said it's a really good idea to sort of slot in all the goals right into the calendar, and this one's explicitly there. So the vision of students as learners and global citizens is going to be aligned with the coherent connections between standards, transferable skills, relevant educational experiences, and so we're just supposed to get a report on what that's supposed to look like. Is what it looks. That's how I read the language.
Mm-hmm.
So. Just let's
All
see
right,
what
so
that
we
looks like. I remember last year this was presented as a really exciting initiative in the district, so I just want to see what's going on.
We have a report by the next thing on January 11th. Because it was due October 27th.
According to our goals, yeah.
Okay. All right. 11. Is that possible? Is that realistic? Or no?
I don't know.
All right, well, if it's not, it's not. That got by us, got by me anyway, usually. That deadline. All right. Any other deadlines we missed? It's possible. Okay. Do we have an executive session?
I don't think we need one unless you think, okay, no.
No.
All right.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn by Mr. Hayner, second by
Second.
Mr. Schlickman. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? That is unanimous. Have a wonderful holiday season. We'll see you in 2018.